Chapter 1366. Reincarnation. Yi Xian's ancient voice rang out as the universe warped. His voice seemed to be the first voice to be heard when the chaotic universe was created. It was filled with loneliness and desolation, as well as a deep sense of helplessness. Eternal silence. The sound of reincarnation. The chaotic universe was too mysterious. Even forbidden characters couldn't comprehend it. Yi Xian's futuristic transformation had already touched upon an extremely mysterious realm. Eternal horror. Everything fell silent. Yi Xian's entire being turned into a light shadow. He actually began to rotate slowly. The starry universe began to distort and turn illusory. It was as if it was turning into a bubble, about to disappear completely. The gate of reincarnation? No. He's simulating the gate of reincarnation. How is this possible? How can he simulate such a terrifying thing? In an instant, the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Fate, and the Lord of Time and Space spoke out at the same time. At this moment, the technique that Yi Xian was using caused their souls to tremble in fear. Moreover, the cultivation within their bodies actually disappeared into thin air, and their souls seemed to be sucked into the door of light that Yi Xian had transformed into. What was the gate of reincarnation? It was a place that even the strongest of all eternity feared and wanted to go. The gate of reincarnation had always been sealed. No one had ever pushed it open, not even forbidden characters who surpassed the strongest of all eternity. No one knew what was behind the gate of reincarnation. However, they strongly believed that as long as they opened the gate of reincarnation, they would be able to break through the path of chaos and not die along with the chaos. But what were they seeing now? Yi Xian had actually simulated the most terrifying thing. Although it was only a simulation, the aura it contained was enough to make these strongest of all eternity tremble in fear. The gate of reincarnation did not stop. Everything melted away. The Lord of Extreme Devil's strongest attack turned into a bubble. His entire being was being pulled in by the gate of reincarnation. His body was completely out of his control. Wrath of Extreme Devil. At this moment, the Lord of the Extreme Fiend howled madly. He wasn't afraid of death, but he didn't want to die in such an embarrassing manner. Even if he had to self-destruct and die, he wanted to drag Yi Xian down with him. Unfortunately, in front of the gate of reincarnation that Yi Xian had created, his cultivation had completely disappeared. Not to mention wanting to self-destruct, even moving a single finger had become extremely difficult. The Lord of the Extreme Devil struggled madly. He constantly channeled his utmost strength, hoping to break free from these shackles. However, it was useless. His entire being was rapidly being pulled over. Death was a very terrifying thing. Unless one was completely disheartened, most people feared death. However, the Lord of the Extreme Devil wasn't afraid of death. What he hated was that he couldn't kill Yi Xian. In the end, he still lost to Yi Xian. The Lord of the Paramount Fiend howled in fury, but his eyes were filled with despair. He could already sense death. This was true death. If he was sucked into the gate of reincarnation, he would no longer exist in the Chaosverse. Suddenly, just as the Lord of the Extreme Devil was about to be sucked into the gate of reincarnation, the door started to shake. With a dong sound, the gate of reincarnation disappeared with a loud bang, and Yi Xian appeared in the starry sky. Yi Xian coughed up a mouthful of blood. His aura immediately withered and his face was as pale as paper. The sound of heavy breathing could be heard from his mouth. On the other side, although the Lord of the Extreme Fiend had escaped death, he had been pulled over by the gate of reincarnation conjured by Yi Xian. He had lost all of his cultivation and was affected by the aura of reincarnation. He too coughed up a mouthful of blood and fell down from the sky. I still failed. Yi Xian murmured weakly. Although he was the one who conjured the gate of reincarnation, he didn't understand its mysteries at all. He had merely been inspired by the art of future transfiguration. He had been so close to success, but in the end, he had failed because the gate of reincarnation was a taboo among taboos. It wasn't something he could control. However, although Yi Xian was somewhat disappointed, he quickly regained his senses. His art of future transfiguration was about to expire. He had to use the remaining time to kill the Lord of the Extreme Fiend once and for all. Die! Boom! The Heavenfall halberd shot over and was instantly grasped by Yi Xian. Yi Xian took a step forward and appeared in front of the Lord of the Extreme Fiend in an instant. Terrifying killing intent erupted from Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian's motto had always been to take the enemy's life while the enemy was sick. Now that the Lord of the Extreme Fiend's cultivation had been reduced by the gate of reincarnation, this was the best opportunity to kill him. Yi Xian absolutely wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Swish! The halberd soared through the sky and pierced through the universe. In Yi Xian's hands, it displayed boundless might. The terrifying, chilling tip of the halberd radiated an unprecedented killing intent. Yi Xian's Heaven's Burial art frantically activated, pouring all of its power into the halberd. Die! Yi Xian thrust his halberd at the Lord of the Extreme Fiend, erupting with an ancient killing intent. It instantly pierced through the Lord of the Extreme Fiend's chest, causing blood to flow uncontrollably from his mouth. Arg! The Lord of the Extreme Fiend roared furiously, but he couldn't use any of his cultivation. His entire body was pierced through by the Heavenfall halberd. He couldn't resist at all. It had to be said that the strongest of all time was the strongest of all time. Even though the Lord of the Extreme Fiend's body had been pierced through by Yi Xian's Heavenfall halberd, he was still alive. His vitality was terrifyingly tenacious. Of course, although the Lord of the Extreme Fiend's cultivation had disappeared, his supreme battle constitution wasn't affected. This was also the reason why he was still alive. Rumble! Yi Xian swung the Heavenfall halberd with a single arm. The Lord of the Extreme Fiend's blood stained the starry sky. His body had been pierced through by the Heavenfall halberd, and his entire body moved along with Yi Xian. I'll send you on your way. Yi Xian roared coldly. His eyes shone with a bloody light. To be able to personally kill a strongest of all time was something he didn't dare to imagine. It was also something that made him extremely excited. Boom! The starry sky erupted and the primal chaos trembled. His art of future transfiguration was about to disappear. Yi Xian could already feel his state beginning to fade. He had to kill the Lord of the Extreme Fiend in this final moment. Swish! The halberd swept through the sky, staining the starry sky with blood. Yi Xian thrust forward with the Heavenfall halberd in hand. The Lord of the Extreme Fiend's entire body hung on the halberd. The two and the halberd were like a dazzling meteor, falling towards the other end of the starry sky. Bang! The halberd destroyed heaven and earth. With a deafening boom, the Lord of the Extreme Fiend was impaled alive by Yi Xian's Heavenfall halberd on a vast and withered star. What? Blood gushed out and the earth melted. The Lord of the Extreme Fiend spat out a mouthful of blood. This blood contained a terrifying might that caused the earth around him to collapse. Swish! Yi Xian pulled the Heavenfall halberd out of the Lord of the Extreme Fiend's chest. Blood spurted out, instantly soaking Yi Xian's entire body. Chapter 1367. It had to be said that the Supreme Devil Lord's blood was too powerful. Yi Xian's body flickered as he was drenched by the Supreme Devil Lord's blood. He was actually absorbing the energy within the Supreme Devil Lord's blood to transform his body. The other Supreme Devils arrived in an instant. When they saw Yi Xian covered in blood and the Supreme Devil Lord lying in a pool of his own blood, their faces darkened and their hearts trembled. As the saying went, without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. The Supreme Devil Lord had met such a tragic end. If they had been in his place, would they have ended up in the same state? There was indeed a difference between the strongest and the weakest, but the difference was definitely not too great. The Lord of the Extreme Devil was in the middle of the strongest, but even he had ended up like this. If Yi Xian continued to grow, perhaps some of them would also end up in such a miserable state in the future. Come kill me. The Lord of the Extreme Devil's entire body was bathed in blood, and a large hole had been opened in his chest. At this moment, he couldn't recover from the loss of his cultivation. However, his eyes were bloodshot as he looked at Yi Xian. There was only madness in his eyes, and he didn't care about his own life at all. You're really stubborn, huh? Bang! Yi Xian fiercely stomped his foot on the Lord of the Extreme Devil's face. His wide foot fiercely crushed the Lord of the Extreme Devil because he was absolutely not a benevolent person, nor would he be moved by the Lord of the Extreme Devil's infatuation with Yi Qing. Yi Xian only believed in one sentence. If anyone wanted to kill him, then he would be his enemy, and becoming his enemy would only lead to death. Killing people and trampling on their dignity was not Yi Xian's hobby, but it was Yi Xian's method. Aren't you a supreme devil lord? Didn't you want to kill me? Now that Lao Tzu is stepping on you, I want to see how you will kill me. Yi Xian's expression was ferocious and sinister. His feet exploded with an enormous force that seemed like the heavens. His feet ruthlessly crushed the face of the Lord of the Extreme Devil, causing the bones of the Lord of the Extreme Devil's face to continuously emit strange sounds. Yi Xian, I'm going to kill you. The Lord of the Extreme Fiend wasn't afraid of death, but he couldn't accept this sort of humiliation. At this moment, he was being crushed beneath Yi Xian's feet. This was a fate worse than death. I admire people who aren't afraid of death. I also know that you aren't afraid of death. However, although death is scary, there is something even scarier: shame. You will also become the biggest joke among the strongest. And this is the price you have to pay for going against me. Yi Xian said calmly. However, every word of his was a stab to the heart, causing the Lord of the Extreme Devil to howl in rage. Look at how lowly you are, Yi Xian murmured. You're as lowly as a dog. There's no need for you to bark like that. Perhaps you think that being one of the most powerful existences of all time is something to be proud of, but in the eyes of the entire Chaosverse, you really are nothing more than a dog. His words seemed to be mocking and humiliating the Lord of the Extreme Fiend, but they were actually his true thoughts. The Chaosverse was a mysterious and boundless place. The most powerful existences of all time were revered and worshipped by all living beings. However, in the eyes of the entire Chaosverse, they were nothing more than slightly stronger ants. They really weren't even comparable to a dog. Yi Xian, kill me if you can. The Lord of the Extreme Fiend howled again and again. Yi Xian's torment and humiliation had left him utterly humiliated and enraged. Whether or not he survived today, he would become the greatest joke of the Chaosverse. He was one of the most powerful existences of all time, yet he was being crushed beneath the feet of someone who hadn't even reached the Tao. This was nothing short of a fantasy. It was something that had never happened before in the history of the Chaosverse. All right, I've played with you enough. You can die now. Yi Xian murmured darkly. He could already sense that his future incarnation was beginning to disperse. It was time for him to send the Lord of the Extreme Fiend on his way. Boom! Yi Xian raised the Heavenfall halberd, the tip of the halberd glowing with light. It was already aimed at the Lord of the Extreme Fiend's forehead, about to deliver a fatal blow. However, there was nothing absolute in the world. At this moment, the Lord of the Extreme Devil had lost his cultivation. As long as Yi Xian pierced through his forehead and crushed his soul, he would be able to take his life. Su Baineng, rest in peace. If you have a next life, do not make an enemy out of me. Rip. Yi Xian's halberd came crashing down. If this strike pierced through Su Baineng's forehead and crushed his soul, the Lord of the Extreme Fiend would cease to exist in the primordial chaos. Sir, please wait. Suddenly, at this critical moment, Yi Qingmei instantly appeared beside Yi Xian. Her face that could overturn all living things was slightly pale, and her eyes carried a hint of pleading as she looked at Yi Xian. You want to save him? What kind of person was Yi Xian? He could tell what Yi Qingmei was thinking with a single glance, causing him to slightly frown. Sir, he protected me all those years ago and even became a demon because of me. Please let him live. Yi Qingmei bit her lip. Qingmei. Tears of blood flowed from the Lord of the Extreme Fiend's eyes. He stared blankly at Yi Qingmei's back, his demonic gaze gradually fading away. Sir, I beg you. At this moment, Yi Qingmei no longer had the might of the Extreme Fiend. Chapter 1368. Yi Xian had always been domineering, cold, and arbitrary. This was especially true in the face of such a major event. He would never change his mind. Die. Yi Xian no longer hesitated. His art of future incarnation was about to dissipate. He thrust his halberd at the Lord of the Extreme Devil's forehead, clearly intending to kill him. However, the Lord of the Extreme Devil showed no fear in the face of Yi Xian's sure-kill attack. Instead, his face turned extremely gloomy because he believed he wouldn't die. Clang. A blade of nirvanic light blocked the Lord of the Extreme Devil, barely saving his life. At the same time, a sinister figure walked towards Yi Xian. Who else could it be but the Undying Heaven Lord? Yi Xian, are you treating me like thin air? The Undying Heaven Lord held his blade horizontally and unleashed the power of nirvanic destruction. He looked at Yi Xian with a sinister glint in his eyes. There was also great fear in his eyes. It wasn't that the Undying Heaven Lord felt pity for the Lord of the Extreme Devil, but that he knew what it meant to be interdependent. If Yi Xian really did kill the Extreme Devil, it would damage the dignity of the Extreme Devil. Moreover, he might end up following in the Extreme Devil's footsteps in the future. Of course, this wasn't the true reason why the Undying Heaven Lord had saved the Extreme Devil. It was because this concerned the secrets of the primordial chaos. Thus, the Extreme Devil couldn't die. It was common knowledge that there were 12 periods in the primordial chaos. Every period would give birth to an Extreme Devil. Together, they were the 12 eternal sovereigns. If one of the eternal sovereigns died, it would be extremely detrimental to the Undying Heaven Lord's plan. It wasn't just the Undying Heaven Lord. The other Extreme Devils all had the same thought. They all strode towards Yi Xian. Clearly, they wouldn't let Yi Xian kill the Extreme Devil. Do you know why I can't die? Bathed in blood, the Lord of the Extreme Devil crawled up from the ground with some difficulty. He then looked at Yi Xian mockingly and said, "The reason is simple. I am a paragon of the 9th period. I exist with the fortune of the chaos. If I die, one of the 12 paragons will be missing when the 12th period comes to an end. Perhaps you don't know this, but the 12 supreme beings represent the chaos of each Yuan Hui. Only when the 12 supreme beings work together will they have the chance to push open the gates of reincarnation. They can't afford to take this risk. Unless you can kill all the supreme beings, you won't be able to kill me." At this moment, the Lord of the Extreme Devil was mocking. However, the venomous look in his eyes was extremely thick. Even if he could survive today, his reputation as a supreme being would be completely destroyed. From now on, he would become the laughingstock of all living beings. "None of the people I want to kill have been able to survive," Yi Xian muttered coldly, a strange and cruel smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. The Lord of the Extreme Devil's face changed. An extremely bad feeling rose up from the bottom of his heart as an extremely terrifying sensation of death enveloped his mind. Not good, something's wrong. None of the supreme beings present were ordinary people. When they saw the strange smile on Yi Xian's face, their hearts trembled violently. In the next moment, the Undying Heaven Lord stood in front of the Lord of the Extreme Devil. The Master of Primal Chaos and the others also sealed off the area, guarding against Yi Xian's trump card. "It's too late. I already knew that you supreme beings were going to interfere. Did you think I wasn't prepared?" Yi Xian roared. Everything was going according to his plan. Although he wanted to kill the Lord of the Extreme Devil, how could he not be wary of these supreme beings who were watching the battle? Yi Xian had never been a careless person. He knew very well how difficult it was to kill a supreme being. Therefore, from the beginning until now, he had only been putting on an act. The real killing move was also reserved for this moment. A terrifying thing happened. Chi! Suddenly, the heaven-destroying halberd disappeared. A flash of reincarnation light flickered. In the next moment, no one could see clearly that the body of the Lord of the Extreme Devil had been cut into two by the heaven-destroying halberd. Bang! The two halves of the corpse fell into a pool of blood, completely cut open from head to toe. That flash of reincarnation light disappeared as if it had never appeared. How is this possible? This scene caused all the supreme beings to cry out in shock. They had already been on guard against Yi Xian's vicious attack, but they did not expect such a result. "Get out of my way!" While everyone was still in shock, Yi Xian underwent a terrifying transformation. An obscure aura erupted. The aura of his art of future transformation that was about to dissipate suddenly increased. His entire person gave off an unimaginably sharp feeling. Attack! The 8 forbidden arts, terrifying amplification. This was the forbidden art that Eternal Shadow had imparted to Yi Xian. Although it could not be compared to his art of future transformation, it could still be considered the 3rd most powerful offensive art of all time. Coupled with Yi Xian's Tribulation Transcender transformation, the two combined into one. In an instant, Yi Xian's combat strength increased to an unimaginable level. He directly surpassed the supreme beings of all time and stepped into the legendary Forbidden Realm. This was Yi Xian's true trump card. It was also the killing move that he had been preparing for a long time. He had been waiting for this moment because no one could stop him from killing the people he wanted to kill. Rumble. Bury the heavens and destroy the earth, not allowing chaos. When Yi Xian used the attack symbol technique and the Tribulation Transcender transformation, he instantly stepped into the Forbidden Realm. At this moment, the aura he exuded was enough to shatter one's soul. Go to hell! Yi Xian took a step forward, causing the stars and universe to explode. Even the illusory heavenly heart of chaos that descended began to show signs of dissipating. His entire being seemed to have turned into the eternal blue sky as he rushed towards the Lord of the Extreme Devil with a violent killing intent. Although the Lord of the Extreme Devil had been cleaved in two, he was still one of the strongest existences of all time. To truly kill him, one would have to grind his bones to dust and nail his soul to death. Only then would one truly be able to kill him. Yi Xian had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. He had been waiting for this moment. His art of future transformation, the attack symbol technique, and the Tribulation Transcender transformation all erupted, directly pushing Yi Xian into the Forbidden Realm. However, when Yi Xian stepped into the Forbidden Realm, Yi Xian finally felt a kind of pressure. He also understood why Aeon Shadow wanted to hide in the Chaos world. At this moment, the entire Chaosverse was trembling. It was as if a pair of eyes had opened in the unseen world, giving him a tremendous amount of pressure. Yi Xian was absolutely certain that he only had an incense stick's worth of time at most. If he didn't kill the Extreme Devil after that, the Chaosverse would send down Chaos heavenly punishment. At that time, he would also suffer the same fate as Aeon Shadow. Aeon Shadow was able to survive because he was strong to begin with. But now, Yi Xian was only borrowing the power of the 3 great forbidden techniques. If Chaos heavenly punishment really came down, he would definitely die without a burial ground. Moreover, Aeon Shadow had once told him that although the attack symbol technique was known as the 3rd greatest killing technique of all time, it wasn't tolerated by the Chaos world. Moreover, it would absorb a great deal of the user's essence. If he didn't use it well, he would turn into a dried corpse and die. Therefore, he had to end this battle quickly. Chapter 1369. Stop him! The Undying Heaven Lord instantly woke up, and the Undying Heaven Blade slashed towards Yi Xian. This was because the 2 halves of the Lord of the Extreme Devil's body were gradually converging behind him. It was obvious that they wanted to merge into one. Scram! With a flip of his palm, Yi Xian could be said to have reached the pinnacle. His 5 fingers were like a giant hammer as they slammed down at the Undying Heaven Lord. Clang! What Undying Heaven Lord? What eternal strongest? This palm was like the eternal firmament as it sent the weapon in the Undying Heaven Lord's hand flying. Then, it slammed down at the Undying Heaven Lord without any decrease in power. Bang! What? The Undying Heaven Lord was instantly sent flying by Yi Xian's attack. His body was like a falling meteor, smashing countless stars into pieces. A mouthful of blood sprayed out from his mouth. How terrifying was a forbidden attack! Back then, Eternal Shadow had single-handedly crushed the 10 strongest and 9 great Star Masters. Although Yi Xian wasn't as terrifying as Eternal Shadow, he wasn't someone the Undying Heaven Lord could deal with now that he had stepped into the forbidden state. Chaos! Destiny! In the next moment, the 2 strongest joined forces as the 2 strongest powers of chaos and destiny burst forth. That terrifying might poured down on Yi Xian like an endless sea of stars. Those who block my path shall die. Yi Xian went completely crazy because he didn't have the time to tangle with these strongest. He had to kill the Lord of the Extreme Devil within an instance's time. Otherwise, all his efforts would be for naught. Bang! Bang! Fist lights pierced through the universe as his feet stepped into the starry skies. At this moment, Yi Xian was in a frenzy. As his fists swung, the entire chaotic universe trembled. Rumble! The two supreme powers were shattered by him, and he charged forward in a dominating manner. His palms formed the power of chaos, and a miniature chaos verse appeared, which he slammed toward the Lord of Chaos and the Master of Fate. Bang! The two strongest instantly retaliated. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had been preparing for this moment from the start. How could the two strongest defend against his sudden attack? Bang! The most powerful attacks unleashed by the Lord of Chaos and the Lord of Fate were instantly disintegrated. The miniature chaotic universe created by Yi Xian, which contained the power of eternity, sent the two of them flying hundreds of millions of miles away. No one could stop him, no one could rival him. No matter how weak Yi Xian was in the past, he was invincible at this moment. Even the fate of chaos could not stop him from advancing. Wanling, disperse the heavenly heart of chaos. His current cultivation is related to the descent of the heavenly heart of chaos. Suddenly, the roar of the Master of Chaos came from all directions. Clearly, he had seen through Yi Xian's state. As long as the heavenly heart of chaos was dispelled, Yi Xian would be beaten back to his original state. At this moment, the Lord of all Spirits' face was as gloomy as water. Although he had made a deal with Yi Xian, the current Yi Xian was far too terrifying. If he stepped forward to fight, he would definitely be no match for him. He understood what the Master of Primal Chaos meant. This was because he had achieved the Tao during the 10th Aeon, and he was also the one who had achieved the Tao in the current era. He was one with the heavenly heart of primal chaos, and only he could dispel it. Myriad Spirit Realm. The Lord of all spirits activated the Myriad Spirit Immortal scripture with a rumble. Myriad Spirit Divine Light permeated the air, and a mysterious aura erupted as well. The descending heavenly heart of primal chaos actually showed signs of dispersing. The Lord of all spirits was the only one who had achieved the Tao in the current era, and he was the only one who could beat Yi Xian back to his original state. Go to hell! Boom! Yi Xian couldn't stop the Lord of all spirits, but he wanted to kill the Lord of the Extreme Devil at the last moment. His entire body instantly appeared in front of the Lord of the Extreme Devil, and at this moment, the Lord of the Extreme Devil's body had already recovered. However, his aura was extremely weak as he fiercely glared at Yi Xian. You're too arrogant. Rumble. The Lord of Destruction finally made his move, but before he could reach Yi Xian punched him. This punch contained the power of a forbidden attack, causing the Lord of Destruction's expression to change greatly. He didn't dare to meet this attack head-on. He only wanted to stop Yi Xian, and he had no intention of fighting to the death with Yi Xian. Boom! The starry sky was pierced through, and hundreds of millions of kilometers turned into a vacuum. Although the Lord of Destruction dodged this attack, it also gave Yi Xian a chance to kill the Lord of Paramount Fiend. Stop him! The Lord of Primal Chaos quickly returned, but it was too late. At this moment, only the Lord of Human Tao, the Lord of Extreme Emotion, and the Lord of Spacetime were present. Unfortunately, the four of them had different expressions, and each of them had their own reasons for not making a move. The Lord of Heaven Devouring was a bloodthirsty person, and whether or not the Lord of Paramount Fiend died had nothing to do with him. Moreover, he had already obtained the Calamity Transcender technique, and he wanted to take advantage of the fact that Yi Xian had killed the Lord of Paramount Fiend to devour his cultivation and step into the Forbidden Realm in one fell swoop. How could he possibly stop Yi Xian? The Lord of Human Tao frowned. Although she was a woman, she had created the power of karma and believed in karma. If she tried to stop Yi Xian, she would inevitably bear the consequences of her actions. This was also the reason why she hadn't made a move yet. As for the Lord of Spacetime and Yi Xian, there was no need to mention them. The Lord of Spacetime had an extremely deep relationship with Yi Xian, and Yi Qingmei was no weak woman. If she had to choose between Yi Xian and the Lord of Paramount Fiend, she could only choose Yi Xian and give up on the Lord of Paramount Fiend. At this moment, Yi Xian was unstoppable. Under the Lord of the Extreme Devil's resentful and unwilling gaze, Yi Xian picked up the heaven-slaying halberd and pierced it towards the center of the Lord of the Extreme Devil's forehead with a ferocious killing intent. Clang! The primal chaos trembled and everything fell silent. The cold tip of the halberd instantly pierced through the Lord of Paramount Fiend's forehead, ruthlessly nailing him to death in space. However, Yi Xian still wasn't at ease. He violently pulled out the heaven-punishing halberd and slashed at the Lord of Paramount Fiend once more. This time, he used all of his cultivation and raised the attack character formula and the Tribulation Transcender transformation to the absolute peak. He was determined to kill the Lord of Paramount Fiend right here and now. Chi-chi-chi. The halberd wreaked havoc in the heavens, slaughtering everything in its path. Countless halberd lights landed on the Lord of Paramount Fiend's body, completely grinding him to pieces in space. Not even a drop of blood was left behind. Silence. Silence. A deathly silence. When Yi Xian finished doing all this, all of the supreme experts were deathly silent. They couldn't believe their eyes, because this was the first time they'd seen with their own eyes that even the strongest of all time could die. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the next moment, the primal chaos trembled and the heavenly melody of the great Tao rang out, as if it were crying. A wisp of mysterious chi rose from where the Lord of Paramount Fiend had disappeared, instantly shooting into the depths of the primal chaos. The ninth epic's heavenly heart of chaos? The undying Heaven Lord returned with a bang, directly abandoning Yi Xian and slashing at the mysterious chi with his blade. However, he couldn't stop it in the slightest. He could only watch as the mysterious chi disappeared into the depths of the universe. Boom! It was also at this moment that the Lord of all spirits dispersed the descending heavenly heart of chaos, and Yi Xian's otherworldly future also retreated. What? Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened to the extreme, and the most terrifying thing was that his body was shriveling up. This was a hidden danger brought about by the attack character formula. The Eternal Shadow had once said that unless it was a matter of life and death, the attack character formula should never be used. Otherwise, this forbidden technique would suck Yi Xian dry and truly leave him without a proper burial ground. Now that his otherworldly future had dissipated, the backlash from the attack character formula began to appear. If this continued, Yi Xian himself would be reduced to ashes, no longer existing in the primal chaos, before the supreme experts of all time could do anything. Chapter 1370. Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood. His body became thinner and thinner, and he began to lose his balance. In the next moment he fell like a kite with its string cut. This was Yi Xian's greatest crisis. Not a drop of his cultivation remained. His flesh and blood were melting rapidly. Even his soul began to dim. This was a sign that he was about to turn into ashes. If this was not stopped, Yi Xian would die without a doubt. Sir! Fortunately, Yi Qing instantly woke up and appeared beside him, directly taking him into her arms. However, the current Yi Xian was extremely dangerous. His flesh and blood were melting inch by inch, and the bones beneath his flesh and blood could already be faintly seen. It was obvious that this battle had consumed too much of Yi Xian's energy. It had already touched his foundation and would take his life. Freeze! Yi Qingmei was, after all, a supreme expert. After the initial panic, she calmed down in an instant. The power of extreme emotion poured into Yi Xian's body, trying to stabilize his injuries. Unfortunately, Yi Qingmei was disappointed. Although her power of extreme emotion was terrifying, it had no effect on Yi Xian's current state. The moment it entered Yi Xian's body, it disappeared without a trace. How can this be? Yi Qingmei's face was pale. She did not expect Yi Xian to suffer such serious injuries. Even she could not save him. Sir, wake up. Yi Qingmei shook Yi Xian's unconscious body. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not react at all because his flame of life was about to be extinguished. Rumble! Suddenly, the starry sky trembled as an extremely powerful pressure descended. The undying Heaven Lord had already walked back. At this moment, his eyes were maliciously staring at Yi Xian, who was in Yi Qingmei's embrace. A trace of hidden fear flashed through his eyes. Extreme emotion, leave him to me. The undying Heaven Lord's voice was like a 10,000-year-old river. He walked step by step towards Yi Xian. Clearly, he would not let go of this opportunity to control Yi Xian. This person is too unpredictable. We can't let him live. The Master of Chaos and the Master of Fate spoke at the same time. They looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. Yi Xian was merely at the Yang birth realm. Yet, he was able to kill an ultimate being just because he had used a great taboo technique. This had already overturned their understanding of the world. Yi Xian had yet to attain the Tao, but he was already so terrifying. If Yi Xian attained the Tao in the next yuan, who would be able to stop him? If he could kill the Supreme Devil today, then when he achieves the Tao in the future, wouldn't killing them be as easy as slaughtering pigs? Moreover, this was only one of the problems. The most important problem was that Yi Xian had too many secrets on him. If they couldn't suppress him today, what would they use to keep Yi Xian in check in the future? The ultimate being of the eternal era was still a human. Every human had their own selfish motives. If they didn't capture Yi Xian today while he was in a weakened state, they wouldn't know how long they would have to wait if they missed this opportunity. Even if they took 10,000 steps back, even if they couldn't suppress Yi Xian today, they had to kill him in this part of the universe. They definitely couldn't let him leave this place alive. After all, the ultimate beings present could already feel the threat. The Supreme Devil Lord was the best example. No one wanted to follow in his footsteps. What are you guys trying to do? At this moment, Yi Qingmei was filled with killing intent. A sharp glint flashed across her eyes. Yi Xian was in a life and death situation right now. Now that these ultimate beings were closing in, Yi Qingmei's heart was heavy. Extreme emotion, he has already killed the Supreme Devil. This is a threat to us ultimate beings. Hand him over to me. Only then can we get rid of this threat completely. If you continue to be stubborn, don't blame me for being merciless. The undying Heaven Lord said coldly. With just you? Yi Qingmei sneered. The power of extreme emotion exploded. She definitely wouldn't let Yi Xian die. Even if she had to use all of her ultimate being's cultivation today, she wouldn't hesitate. Extreme emotion, there's a big problem with this person. Hand him over. The Master of Chaos frowned. He had already expressed his stance. The other ultimate beings nodded as well. They each took a step forward and surrounded the Master of Extreme Emotion. Qingmei. Suddenly, a voice as soft as a mosquito's rang out. This caused Yi Qingmei's expression to change. She hurriedly looked over at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was struggling to open his eyes. However, his flesh and blood had already withered to the extreme. It was terrifying, as if he was just skin and bones. Sir, don't worry. If anyone dares to touch you, I will not hesitate even if I have to die together with them. Yi Qingmei said sternly. You're no match for them. Retreat. Retreat. Yi Xian relied on his tenacious willpower to stabilize himself. Although his eyes were withered and lifeless, they still had an unyielding expression. Even though his appearance was like a skeleton, his spine was still straight and straight. Devouring sky, all spirits, are you not going to fulfill your promise? At this moment, Yi Xian didn't have the strength to fight at all. He could only escape this disaster by coveting these two ultimate beings. When he said this, the expressions of the devouring sky demon lord and the master of all spirits changed slightly. A trace of hesitation flashed through their eyes. Once upon a time, the master of all spirits' wish was to fight Yi Xian and truly wash away the humiliation from all those years ago. However, the terror that Yi Xian displayed today began to cause the master of all spirits to lose some of his confidence. The master of all spirits knew that he wasn't much stronger than the lord of the extreme devil. If the current Yi Xian was already so terrifying, then when Yi Xian reached the Tao in the future, would he still be a match for Yi Xian? The devouring sky demon lord also frowned slightly. He originally thought that with the tribulation transcender technique, he would be able to step into the forbidden realm in the future and truly surpass the ultimate beings of all ages. However, the things that Yi Xian displayed today made him feel extreme fear in his heart. Fortunately, although the two ultimate beings each had their own thoughts, Ultimate beings were still ultimate beings. They naturally had to fulfill their promises. Boom, boom. The devouring sky demon lord and the master of all spirits took a step forward at the same time and instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Then, they calmly looked at the undying god lord and the others. He can't die. The two spoke at the same time. Although they didn't reveal any aura, their words were powerful and resonant. It was obvious that they wouldn't allow the master of chaos and the others to harm Yi Xian. Ultimate beings were people who kept their promises. It was impossible for them to break their own promises. If the two of them went back on their promise to Yi Xian, their mental states as ultimate beings would be damaged. This was not an outcome that they wanted to see. Are the two of you crazy? You actually want to protect him? The undying god lord was stunned and puzzled. Then he angrily roared. He didn't expect that the devouring sky demon lord and the master of all spirits would betray him at such a critical moment. If it were other ultimate beings, it would be fine. However, these two ultimate beings had taken action. Even the master of chaos began to frown. As for the master of destiny, his eyes flashed with a ruthless light. The devouring sky demon lord's heaven-devouring demonic art was extremely domineering. He was definitely ranked in the top 5 of the 10 ultimate beings and should be on par with the undying god lord. Chapter 1371. The Lord of all spirits was the last to achieve the Tao. Logically speaking, he should be the weakest of the 10, but he was the one who had achieved the Tao. He was the ruler of the chaos verse of the 10th Eon, and in the 10th Eon he was supported by the edicts of chaos. At this moment, the two of them were working together to protect Yi Xian. With the addition of the madwoman Lord of Extreme Love, the other supreme experts found this extremely troublesome. Yi Xian and I are fated. Please don't make things difficult for him. Suddenly, the Lord of Time and Space slowly walked over. He also stood in front of Yi Xian, and his attitude caused the expressions of the undying Heaven Lord and the others to turn extremely gloomy. The 4 supreme experts stood out at the same time. On the other hand, there were only 5 on the undying Heaven Lord's side. Needless to say, the Lord of Primal Chaos and the Lord of Fate had clearly expressed their stance. The Lord of Destruction had just stopped Yi Xian and was obviously on their side. Only the Lord of Human Tao's attitude was ambiguous. No one knew what she meant. Human Tao, this person is extremely dangerous. Only by killing him can we get rid of future troubles. The undying Heaven Lord looked at the Lord of Human Tao. Today's karma will be repaid in the future. Yi Xian and I have a karma to settle. Although I won't help him, I won't make things difficult for him either. The Lord of Human Tao walked away slowly. However, before he left, he took a deep look at Yi Xian before he turned into a ray of light and disappeared. Among the 10 supreme experts, the Lord of Human Tao was the one who kept the lowest profile. Although the power of karma wasn't well known, the other supreme experts didn't dare to underestimate her. Damn it! After the Lord of Human Tao left, the situation was in a deadlock. Both sides were the 4 supreme experts. If one really had to differentiate who was stronger, the Lord of Primal Chaos was obviously stronger. After all, the Lord of Primal Chaos and the Lord of Fate were ranked 1st and 2nd in the Chaosverse. There was also the Lord of Undying who was ranked 4th. This lineup was definitely the strongest. However, Yi Xian's side wasn't weak either. The Lord of Sky Devouring could stop the Lord of Undying, the Lord of Spacetime could stop the Lord of Fate, and the Lord of All Spirits was a supreme expert of the current era. He could definitely hold the Lord of Primal Chaos back. The Lord of Destruction was the only one left. The Lord of Extreme Love could naturally stop him as well. The two sides were evenly matched. If they really wanted to fight for Yi Xian without a battle to the death, the outcome. Time and time, you're too foolish. The Master of Chaos frowned and looked at the Master of Time and Space with disappointment. Chaos, destiny, space, and time. These 3 laws maintained the basic operations of the Chaosverse, and they ran through the Chaosverse for 12 periods. Today, for the sake of Yi Xian, he was actually on the opposite side. This was unacceptable to the Lord of Chaos, and it made him extremely disappointed in the Lord of Time and Space. Brother Primal Chaos, I once received his favor, and I believe that he is the key to breaking the path of chaos. I hope you won't force me to take action, the space-time master said in a low voice. This person is too strange. We can't let him live today. If you insist on protecting him, we brothers can only turn against each other. The Lord of Primal Chaos seemed calm, but he knew too many secrets of the Primal Chaos. Yi Xian's performance today worried him too much. If he couldn't control him, then the only way was to kill him. Only then would he be able to guard against him. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Just kill him. The Undying Heaven Lord roared. The Undying Heaven blade appeared with a flip of his hand. He slashed out millions of miles of blade light. It was as if the stars and the universe were about to be cut in half by his blade. The Lord of Fate was even simpler. He directly used the great art of fate. The stars within millions of miles began to distort. The power of fate that controlled all life whizzed toward Yi Xian. Suppress. With the two supreme experts attacking, the Lord of Primal Chaos no longer hesitated. No matter what, he couldn't let Yi Xian live today. The power of Primal Chaos brewed and directly suppressed the Lord of Spacetime. Rumble. In the next moment, the entire Primal Chaos began to riot. The Lord of Spacetime also attacked. The other three supreme experts also used their own supreme techniques. The 8 supreme experts actually fought against each other in an instant. Bang, bang, bang. Great technique conquering the heavens, dominating the starry sky. The power displayed in the battle between the 8 supreme experts was too terrifying. The supreme power of destruction surged in the starry sky. Countless stars were turned into ashes, and the galloping Milky Way was also collapsing. At this moment, Yi Xian's body withered. Blood flowed out of the corners of his mouth. His body that was only skin and bones continued to wither. His skin began to crack inch by inch, revealing the pale white bones inside. Without any hesitation or shame, Yi Xian only had one word in his mind at this moment, and that was to run. His current state was extremely unstable. If he used the great art of fate, he would exhaust himself. Moreover, with the addition of the attack symbol formula and the tribulation transcender transformation, his flame of life was fading. At this moment, whether it was his flesh, blood, essence, soul, or primordial spirit, they were all crazily suffering from the backlash. Even the extreme love master couldn't stabilize his injuries just now. He had to leave this place immediately and find a way to deal with his current state of backlash. Otherwise, before the Lord of Primal Chaos and the others could kill him, his soul would dissipate and he would die. Although Yi Xian's cultivation had been depleted, his body could still be used. He directly fell toward the 5 regions of chaos below. Stop him! Although the 8 supreme experts were crazily attacking, the Undying Heaven Lord and the others were still staring at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape. How could they allow that? Die! The Undying Heaven Lord repelled the heaven-devouring demon master with a saber strike. The Undying Heaven saber slashed down at Yi Xian. The saber light that could split heaven and earth was too terrifying. It carried with it an ancient killing intent as it attacked Yi Xian. How dare you! Yi Qingmei had been paying attention to Yi Xian. He repelled the Lord of Destruction and slapped out with the power of extreme love, instantly blocking in front of Yi Xian. Bang! The saber light of Nirvana was too terrifying. The power of Nirvana was even more ferocious. With a chaotic explosion, the 2 supreme powers canceled each other out. However, at this moment, Yi Xian was already in an extremely weak state. He couldn't withstand even the slightest attack. After all, his true cultivation was only at the Yangxing realm. At this moment he was like a lamp that had run out of oil. Just the aftermath alone had caused his body to crack to the extreme. His flesh and blood dissipated with a loud bang. Only his pale white bones were falling toward the chaotic world below. Sir? Yi Qingmei's face was filled with anxiety. She suddenly chased after Yi Xian. Yi Xian's life was most likely in danger after being hit by the aftermath. You can't leave. The Lord of Destruction blocked Yi Qingmei's path. A great spell of destruction blasted out fiercely, instantly stopping Yi Qingmei. Haha! The undead Heaven Lord laughed wildly and said, "He's dead. He was already hit by the backlash of the forbidden technique. Now that he's been hit by my Nirvana attack, even if he can escape today, his soul will definitely be destroyed and scattered in the chaos." The situation instantly reversed. At this moment, it was no longer the Lord of Time and Space who was stopping the undead Heaven Lord and the others. Instead, it was the undead Heaven Lord who was stopping the Lord of Time and Space from saving Yi Xian. Although the saber he had just stepped out did not hit Yi Xian directly, the aftermath was not something Yi Xian could withstand. Moreover, under the backlash of the taboo technique, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to survive. If he could survive, that would be the biggest joke in the world. Damn it. The Lord of Time and Space was finally enraged. The power of time roared out, and the long river of time was channeled by him. Obviously, he was really angry. Rumble. The 8 supreme experts were fighting in the chaos, and the entire chaotic universe was in turmoil. At this moment, no one could get away to chase after Yi Xian. They could only watch as Yi Xian turned into white bones and fell into the chaotic world. However, the 8 supreme experts knew very well that Yi Xian's chances of survival were too slim. Unless there was a forbidden character to save Yi Xian, there was no way he could survive. Chapter 1372. Thousands of years had passed, and the past had become smoke. Tens of millions of years seemed to be a long time, but it was only a very short period of time for the entire chaotic universe. However, during these tens of millions of years, countless famous supreme seeds had appeared in the chaotic world, setting off waves in the entire chaotic world. 5 regions of chaos, Beichen star field. The chaotic world was divided into 5 star fields. Needless to say, the central region was the center of the chaotic world, and the east, south, west, and north regions surrounded the central region. Beichen star field was a bitterly cold place among the 5 regions. It was in cold wind and snow all year round. Even the sun in the starry sky could not change the bitterly cold environment of Beichen star field. Although Beichen star field was bitterly cold, the practitioners there were very fierce and ruthless. Due to the lack of cultivation resources in Beichen star field, in order to survive, all kinds of bloody things happened from time to time. Human life was the most worthless thing in Beichen star field. In order to obtain limited cultivation resources, the entire Beichen star field could be said to be extremely chaotic. All kinds of dirty means were used, and killing was the most direct thing. This also led to the tradition of valiance in Beichen star field. Whether it was mountains, rivers, or glaciers, as long as there were living creatures, they would form a certain force. They would gather together for warmth, hunt ominous beasts for food, and barter these ominous beasts for their own needs. After the 10 great Yuans, the practitioners of Beichen star field fought day and night with ominous beasts. Whether it was their wisdom, cultivation methods, or secret skills, they had all reached the peak. This was also something that other regions could not compare with. Perhaps the practitioners of Beichen star field were not the strongest, but in terms of killing means, they were definitely the best. Therefore, the entire Beichen star field was barren. Anyone who could walk out of Beichen star field was definitely regarded as a powerful figure and could even become an overlord. The cold wind whistled, and the north wind was biting cold. The sky was full of flying snow, and the endless glaciers made people unable to see the end at a glance. This was a desolate land of danger. It was also a land of millions of miles of floating ice. The ice on the ground looked thick and heavy, but it was actually just a facade. If one was careless and stepped on the thin ice, they would be swallowed by the water of the ice sea. In such a harsh environment, there were actually 2 figures walking on the glacial ground. In this snowy scene, it was somewhat inconceivable. "Uncle, does the extreme Een ice fox really live here?" He saw a young man wearing a beast-skin cotton-padded jacket. Waves of heat were emitted from his body to resist the cold wind. Beside the youth, there was a middle-aged man wearing a robe. However, his robe was also made from the fur of a fierce beast. It was obvious that the cultivation of this uncle and nephew was not high. Otherwise, they would not be wearing such heavy robes. In the North Star field, everyone practiced cultivation. From the way they dressed, one could roughly tell their cultivation level. The stronger they were, the more they didn't fear the bitter cold. As for the weaker ones, they needed the fur of vicious beasts to keep themselves warm. After all, although the chaotic world was a holy place for cultivation, not everyone was a cultivator. There were also a large number of mortals. The wizards in the family have already calculated that the extreme ice fox is in this dangerous glacial ground. As long as we catch this beast, there is hope for your mother's cold blood disease to be cured. The middle-aged man said in a low voice. However, if one listened carefully, they would find that his words were slightly heavy, and a bleak aura was faintly blooming around him. Hearing his uncle's words, the youth nodded solemnly. A fierce look flashed in his eyes, and there was a persistence that ordinary people didn't have. A flash of light and a gust of wind suddenly rose. A white light shot across the glacial ground, causing the uncle and nephew to exclaim, "Uncle! The extreme ice fox!" The youth shouted loudly. His small face was already red, and he was also reminding the middle-aged man. Even without the youth's reminder, the middle-aged man had already found the trace of the extreme ice fox. He stepped on the ice, and the aura around him whistled. He flew with the wind and suddenly shot toward the extreme ice fox. A sawtooth iron net appeared in his hand. 3 steps turned into 2 steps. The middle-aged man looked solemn and suddenly threw the sawtooth iron net at the extreme ice fox. This ominous beast was indeed a fox. Its innate spiritual intelligence was not low, and it was about to transform into a human form. When it realized that it was in danger, its cunning eyes flashed. It suddenly stopped and shot to the other side. "I knew you were a cunning beast. Where do you think you are going?" The middle-aged man's voice was excited. The sawtooth iron net changed direction and strangely appeared on the head of the extreme ice fox. Obviously, the middle-aged man had already known the characteristics of this ominous beast before he came here. Naturally, he was prepared to capture this ominous beast in his hands. Seeing that the extreme ice fox was about to be captured by the uncle and nephew, something unexpected happened. Boom! The heaven and earth shook. The glacier shattered, and the snow that filled the sky suddenly stopped. The space and time of this area seemed to be frozen. A black figure rushed out from the ice sea, and a lifeless aura was emitted from this person's body. And it was this small mistake that caused the extreme ice fox to turn into a white light and disappear from the uncle and nephew's sight. The sawtooth iron net also missed and fell on the thick ice. The extreme ice fox, gone? Looking at the scene before him, the youth was completely dumbfounded. His eyes began to turn red. "Oh, who am I?" The figure stared at the endless glaciers as a dazed look flashed across his eyes. His brows were slightly furrowed as if he was recalling something. "You bastard, give me back my extreme ice fox." Looking at the culprit in the void, the youth roared at him. If one listened carefully, the youth's voice was choked with sobs, as if he was about to cry at any time. The youth's voice pulled the man's thoughts back to reality. He slowly lowered his head to look at the uncle and nephew, and then looked at the white fox that was fleeing in panic on the ground in the distance. He faintly understood something. "Yun, don't be rude." The middle-aged man's face changed greatly. He quickly stepped forward and hurriedly blocked the youth behind him. Then he bowed to the mysterious man and said, "Senior, please forgive my nephew. He is just a young man. If he has been disrespectful to you, please forgive him." The middle-aged man was a practitioner, but only a small one. According to the division of the cultivation realm, he was only at the gold core stage. In the entire chaotic world, he was even inferior to an ant. As for the black-clothed man standing in the void, he couldn't see through his cultivation at all. Although the other party didn't reveal any aura, his body and mind were trembling. It was as if the other party could turn him and his nephew into ashes with a single glance. At this moment, the middle-aged man was afraid that the mysterious black-robed man would kill them in a rage. After all, killing people in the Bachan star field was as easy as eating and drinking. Chapter 1373. Uncle, the extreme ice fox is my mother's life-saving medicine. If this bastard hadn't shown up, the beast wouldn't have escaped. The young man's eyes were red and misty. He roared, clearly unwilling to accept this outcome. Shut your mouth. The middle-aged man's expression changed. He turned around and slapped the young man's cheek, causing the young man to freeze in place. He didn't know why his uncle had slapped him. Bastard, it's just a little ice fox. How dare you be so rude to a senior? If you continue to be so presumptuous, you'll be punished according to the clan's rules when we return. The middle-aged man's words were cold. He kept shooting glances at the young man, his eyes filled with worry. The young man was already furious, but when he saw the look in his uncle's eyes, he was shocked. He sadly shut his mouth and didn't say another word. Although the young man was immature, he knew how cruel the North Star domain was. Experts were as common as the heavens, and people were as common as flies. How could he not understand his uncle's meaning? The man standing in the air was obviously a terrifying expert. If he really wanted to kill the two of them, they would definitely die. Senior, this nephew of mine. When the young man didn't speak, the middle-aged man relaxed. He hurriedly bowed to the black-robed man, wanting to say some words of apology. Before the middle-aged man could finish, the black-robed man's eyes focused on the young man. Then he stepped into the air and walked toward the young man. The black-robed man's actions startled the middle-aged man. A fierce look flashed in his eyes. He quickly stepped in front of the young man and said, "My lord, you are a supreme expert. Why do you need to get angry with mortal cultivators like us? My nephew was disrespectful to you, and I'm willing to pay with my life. I only ask that you let this poor child go." Uncle. The young man knew he had caused a great disaster. He had offended this mysterious expert with his disrespectful words, and now he was implicating his uncle to die here. This caused him to cry out in grief. The actions of the uncle and nephew caused the black-robed man to frown. Although he couldn't remember who he was, that didn't mean his intelligence had regressed. He could see that the uncle and nephew were extremely afraid of him. Rumble. Although he couldn't remember who he was, the usage of his own techniques had been engraved into his bones. The black-robed man stretched out his palm and a gigantic hand that was tens of thousands of feet long appeared. The entire world rumbled and exploded, causing despair to appear on the faces of the uncle and nephew. Boom! The giant heavenly hand blotted out the sky and covered the earth. It terrifyingly covered this part of the sky. Amidst the flying snow, this giant heavenly hand stretched towards the ground in the distance. Following a panicked fox cry, the giant heavenly hand dissipated and a white fox appeared in the black-clothed man's hand. The black-clothed man tossed the white fox to the youth, who caught it in a daze. Then, he grabbed the extreme ice fox tightly in his hand. This was the medicine that could save his mother. He and his uncle had not died, and the extreme ice fox had been recovered. This caused the youth to go wild with joy, but there was also confusion in his eyes. He looked at the black-clothed man with a puzzled expression. Looking at the scene before him, the middle-aged man was completely stunned. Then, with a plop, he knelt on the solid ice and kowtowed to the black-robed man. "Thank you, sir, for sparing my life." After saying this, the middle-aged man hurriedly said to the youth, "Why aren't you kowtowing and thanking Senior for his kindness?" The youth was awakened by his uncle's words. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and thanked the black-clothed man. But before the youth knelt down, a gentle force stopped his movement, and this force also made the middle-aged man stand up. The uncle and nephew looked at the black-clothed man in a daze. They were so nervous that they did not know what to say. "What year is it now?" The black-clothed man's voice was slightly stiff because he had not spoken for thousands of years. He did not know where he was or who he was, but some fragments kept flashing through his mind, which made him frown tightly. This is the ice-sea cold river of the Bachan star field. Today is the 820,000 year of the 10th Yuan Hui year. The middle-aged man hurriedly replied. The 10th Yuan Hui year? The chaotic world? After experiencing the initial confusion, the black-clothed man's memory was gradually recovering. The pictures in his mind were connected one after another, as if he had fallen into a distant memory. I remember everything. After half an hour, The black-clothed man's eyes flickered, and an extremely terrifying aura flashed by. The world instantly stagnated, and the cold wind between heaven and earth dissipated. I didn't expect that I would come back to life. It seems that the heavens have not forsaken me, Yi Xian. No wonder the NI character formula is called a taboo skill. The black-clothed man was Yi Xian. Thousands of years ago, he fell into the Baichen star field and directly fell into the IC. It was not until thousands of years later that he reappeared. However, after these tens of millions of years, Yi Xian had been in a daze the entire time. He was truly on the verge of turning into ashes. Thousands of years ago, Yi Xian's flesh and blood had all melted, and he had turned into a skeleton. He had also been hit by the aftermath of the deathless Godlord's attack. What's more, the attack formula had backfired on him. Logically speaking, he should have died. However, when Yi Xian fell into the IC in front of him, he relied on his unwavering willpower to prevent his soul from dispersing. At the last moment of his life, he finally used the last trump card he had prepared. And this trump card was the NI character formula of the 8 taboo skills. At the beginning, the Eternal Shadow passed on 2 taboo skills to him. One was the attack formula, and the other was the NI character formula. The function of the attack formula did not need to be introduced. There was only one function of the NI character formula: destruction and establishment, seeking life in death. These simple words explained the function of the NI character formula, and it was also the reason why Yi Xian could be reborn after thousands of years. The NI character formula was a great regeneration skill, and it was also one of the top 3 taboo skills. Even the Eternal Shadow passed it on to Yi Xian was extremely distressed. One had to know that the Eternal Shadow had survived because of the NI character formula. How could a taboo character value a taboo skill so highly be ordinary? However, although the NI character formula could allow one to seek life in death, it also had a 90% chance of survival. Fortunately, Yi Xian's willpower was extremely strong. Although he was on the verge of death, he still stabilized his last bit of consciousness and kept using the NI character formula. Finally, after thousands of years, he came back from the dead. Moreover, not only did he come back from the dead, Yi Xian's cultivation had crossed the half-step Dao querying realm and he had become a Dao querying realm existence. Also, because of the NI character formula, he had directly avoided the Dao querying realm tribulation. After all, there was no tribulation more terrifying than the battle back then. It was a miracle that Yi Xian had survived. Now that he had stepped into the Dao querying realm, he had been reborn. However, after thousands of years of slumber, Yi Xian felt that it had been a long time. Even when he had just broken out of seclusion under the IC, his mind was still in a mess. It was only after this uncle and nephew pair reminded him that he finally remembered who he was. You supreme experts didn't expect this, did you? I'm still alive in this world. Yi Xian smiled coldly. A brutal killing intent flashed across his eyes. He was a vengeful person. Although he had killed the Lord of the Extreme Devil back then, he had never forgotten that the Undying Heaven Lord and the Lord of Chaos wanted to take his life. Chapter 1374. Senior, if there's nothing else, we'll take our leave now. Yi Xian's appearance made the uncle and nephew extremely nervous. Although the middle-aged man couldn't see Yi Xian's cultivation base, he knew that Yi Xian was definitely a powerful expert. He wasn't someone he could look up to. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes when he saw the middle-aged man's respectful expression. He could feel the man's reverence for him. This was the cruel world. The weak were as insignificant as ants, while the strong were as heavy as mountains. In the face of absolute strength, one could only stay alive by being cautious. Where's the nearest city? Yi Xian might be bloodthirsty, but he wasn't a killing machine. Moreover, this uncle and nephew hadn't offended him, so he didn't want to waste time talking to 2 ants. Since the uncle and nephew wanted to leave as soon as possible, Yi Xian didn't intend to force them to stay. He asked about the location of this place. He wanted to go to the North Star Domain's gathering place and find out the result of the battle millions of years ago. After all, when he fled back then, the outcome of that battle between the strongest was something he was concerned about. However, Yi Xian didn't intend to return to the Grand Central Domain. Since millions of years had passed and he had just stepped into the Dao Querying Realm, he might as well continue hiding until he reached the Immortal Realm. Then, he could return to the Grand Central Domain. Faced with Yi Xian's questions, the middle-aged man answered without hiding anything. He pointed to the nearest city for Yi Xian and was about to leave. While Yi Xian and the middle-aged man were talking, the young man stole glances at Yi Xian from time to time. His eyes were filled with anticipation, as if he wanted to say something. Perhaps sensing the young man's thoughts, the middle-aged man gave him a cryptic look. Then he slowly shook his head. Clearly, this person's identity was strange and it was best not to get involved. Senior, this is a rough map of the North Star Domain. The locations of the major orthodoxies and cities are marked on it. If there's nothing else, we'll take our leave first. The middle-aged man bowed and bid farewell to Yi Xian. Yi Xian merely glanced at the map and casually tossed it back to the middle-aged man. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared before the eyes of the uncle and nephew. Seeing Yi Xian leave, a look of disappointment flashed in the youth's eyes. He then said to the middle-aged man, "Uncle, this person is clearly an extremely powerful expert who can heal Mother. Why don't we?" Without waiting for the young man to finish, the middle-aged man waved his hand and interrupted him. With a serious expression he said, "This person's origin is unknown. His cultivation is indeed terrifying to the point that it makes me tremble. However, I can feel that this person is extremely murderous from his body. Although he has restrained his aura, didn't you notice that the way he looked at us was as if he was looking at two ants? This kind of expert treats human lives like grass. It's better not to get too involved with him. Moreover, we have already obtained the extreme Een Ice Fox. The elder in the clan is also a minor saint. As long as we beg him, he will definitely be able to help your mother. But the elder and the others..." Hearing his uncle's words, a look of hatred flashed in the youth's eyes. It was obvious that he hated the so-called elder in the clan. "Say no more. No matter how much they despise you, you are still the descendant of the Shao clan. Moreover, sister-in-law is also the wife of Big Brother. They will not leave you in the lurch." The middle-aged man could completely feel the hatred in the youth's heart. He comforted him, hoping to resolve the resentment in the youth's heart. All of a sudden, the glacier that stretched for thousands of miles shook. Snow fluttered violently in the sky. Icebergs exploded one after another, and the sound of explosions could be heard continuously. It was as if the heavens and earth were falling apart. Could it be that the rumor is true? That there is a giant ice sea beast under the glacier? This strange phenomenon caused the middle-aged man to exclaim in fear. Without waiting for the youth's response, he grabbed the youth and fled into the distance. Boom! The ice surface that stretched for thousands of miles was completely shattered. The earth-shaking sound could be heard. A body that was tens of thousands of feet tall emerged from the ice sea. The huge body was so huge that one could not see the end of it. It was impossible to see the difference between the head and the tail of the beast. Giant ice sea beast. Looking at the scene in front of him, the middle-aged man's eyes were filled with despair. The giant ice sea beast was a terrifying beast that lived in the depths of the ice sea. It was said that it lurked under the ice sea. Its cultivation base was comparable to a minor saint. How could a puny cultivator like him fight against it? The beast swung its tail, creating a monstrous ice sea. Ice rain fell from the sky, trapping the uncle and the nephew in one area. The giant ice sea beast roared madly. It sensed that the two humans were its food. Although it was not enough to fill the gap between its teeth, it was still a kind of food. It had been suppressing itself for thousands of years. That terrifying human had finally left. For the past thousands of years, it could only hide in its cave at the bottom of the sea. Now that it saw its food that it had not seen for a long time, how could it let the uncle and nephew leave? "I will stop it. Take the ice fox and run." Facing such a crisis, the middle-aged man was filled with despair. He could only hope that he could attract the attention of the giant ice sea beast and let the youth escape. Clang! The cold saber was unsheathed. 100 feet long saber chi whizzed out. The middle-aged man roared and rushed towards the giant ice sea beast, hoping to open a path for the youth. "Uncle!" Looking at his uncle's suicidal actions, the youth's eyes turned red as he cried out in grief. "Don't worry about me. Take the ice fox and run." Sensing that the youth was still not willing to leave, the middle-aged man roared. The steel saber in his hand brought up 1,000 feet long saber-chi, continuously hacking towards the giant ice sea beast. Like a moth flying into a flame, it was like an egg hitting a rock. Roar! The sound shook the heaven and earth. The ice sea was shaking. The middle-aged man's actions had completely triggered the giant ice sea beast's ferocious nature. A mere ant dared to use weapons against it. This puny human was simply courting death. The ice river poured down from the sky, and the beast's head emerged from the ice river. Its 10,000 feet long mouth emitted a bloodthirsty aura. A terrifying suction force bloomed from the mouth, dragging the middle-aged man towards the beast's mouth like a rootless duckweed. "Uncle!" Looking at the scene in front of him, the youth cried out. A sharp sword appeared in his hand. He stepped on the ice, wanting to save his uncle. "If I die, then so be it. I can't let my big brother die." But sensing the youth's actions, the middle-aged man roared. He could die here, but he did not want to see his nephew die here. How could he face his big brother in the underworld? "No!" Looking at the giant ice sea beast that was about to swallow the middle-aged man, the youth cried out. His eyes were filled with despair. There was no way he could fight against this terrifying beast. "This is really troublesome." Suddenly, an indifferent voice rang out. This voice was like thunder, but also like the cold wind of the underworld, causing the giant ice sea beast to be stunned. The terrifying suction force suddenly disappeared. The middle-aged man fell from the sky. The youth hurriedly caught his uncle. His eyes shone with a sense of relief. Chapter 1375. No one knew when it happened. Yi Xian was dressed in black, and 3,000 strands of black hair hung behind his head. He followed the snow that filled the sky, and the howling wind caused his clothes to explode. Although he didn't have the slightest aura around him, he stood in the air as if he was the ruler of the world. Looking at the scene in front of them, the uncle and nephew were shocked. The middle-aged man came back to his senses and shouted at Yi Xian, "Run! This giant ice sea beast is about to become a supreme saint. You are no match for it." Yi Xian's face was calm. He was so calm that there were no ripples. He stared at the giant ice sea beast in the void. Just his gaze alone made the giant ice sea beast not dare to move. "Scram!" Yi Xian spoke in an indifferent and calm voice. He spat out a short and calm word without the slightest bit of power. What happened next shocked the uncle and nephew. The giant ice sea beast that caused the two of them to feel fear and despair actually trembled. Then, it turned around and abruptly sank into the ice sea. The enormous ice river water stirred up endless waves. This terrifying fierce beast was actually scared away by Yi Xian's words and fled in panic. The uncle and nephew were completely turned into puppets. They felt like they were dreaming. A giant ice sea beast that was about to face the tribulation of a supreme saint was scared off by a person. What cultivation level was this black-robed man in front of them? Sage King? Creation? Yin Yang? Or was it a path-seeking almighty who had transcended the mortal world? The ferocious name of the giant ice sea beast was well known to the world. Even a supreme saint would not want to provoke such a ferocious beast. After all, a beast's body was much stronger than a human's. However, the person in front of them could make the beast turn around and flee. This showed that the person in front of them had an unimaginable cultivation level. "Senior, thank you for saving our lives." The middle-aged man quickly came to his senses. He hurriedly knelt on the broken ice and kowtowed to Yi Xian. "Actually, your life and death have nothing to do with me. Since I have saved your lives, you will have to be my servants for the time being." Yi Xian had never been a benevolent person, and he wasn't so bored as to save two unrelated people. The only reason he had returned was because he was alone, and there were some trivial matters that needed someone to deal with. He also needed to familiarize himself with the North Star sector as soon as possible, and this uncle and nephew pair could be his guides. "Servant." The middle-aged man's expression changed greatly. He had long felt that Yi Xian was not a kind person. At this moment, he actually wanted to take the two of them as servants. This simply made his heart tremble. It had to be known that servants were worse than dogs in the Northern Star domain. Their masters could kill them at will. Some female servants were even swapped. The tragedy of it was enough to make one's hair stand on end. I'm willing to be Senior's servant. I only beg Senior to save my mother's life. Without waiting for the middle-aged man's response, the youth knelt on the ground with a thud and kowtowed to Yi Xian repeatedly. His eyes were faintly red. "You?" The middle-aged man whispered in a trembling voice. He hadn't expected the youth to be so muddle-headed. Could it be that he couldn't see that this black-robed man before him was not a good person? "You have a great hatred in your heart, and a demonic heart has been born." Not bad, not bad. What kind of person was Yi Xian? He had created his own buried heaven technique, learned a great taboo technique, and comprehended many supreme techniques. His vision was no less than that of a supreme expert. He could see at a glance that the youth had a demonic heart. Although he looked simple and pure, the demonic nature in his eyes was deeply rooted. If he could lead him onto the demonic path, he would definitely become a sharp blade in his hand in the future. Of course, no matter how good this youth's aptitude was or how strong his demonic nature was, Yi Xian did not care. His true goal was to make a hidden move, one that could kill a supreme expert. Yi Xian was a vengeful person. Even if he was no match for a supreme expert now, that did not stop him from making plans for the future. He wanted to raise a demonic son that could shake the heavens and shake the earth. A demonic son that could topple a supreme expert, and this youth in front of him was a suitable candidate. The mystical demonic body. Yi Xian had not observed the youth's constitution too much earlier, but when he saw the demonic nature in the youth's eyes, he could tell that the youth had the extremely rare mystical demonic body. Although the mystical demonic body was not one of the 12 supreme battle constitutions, nor was it a legendary variant battle constitution, the mystical demonic body could still be ranked among the top of the many battle constitutions. Of course, what Yi Xian valued was not the youth's battle constitution, but the demonic nature in the youth's eyes. As long as he could draw out this demonic nature, this youth would become his most important chess piece in the future. Aptitude could be improved, and so could one's constitution. Only one's temperament was the most important. Yi Xian himself had a mortal body, but he had still made it this far. Even though supreme seeds were far inferior to him, the youth in front of him had a demonic heart and was very suitable for becoming a demonic person. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens in the unseen world for this youth to appear in front of him. Thinking of what he had planned, a cruel and cold smile appeared at the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. He seemed to have seen an extremely exciting scene that would give these supreme experts a huge surprise. However, it was still too early. The youth in front of him was too innocent. Although he had a demonic heart, he had not yet drawn it out. He needed to guide him step by step to achieve what Yi Xian wanted. "What's your name?" Yi Xian strolled in front of the youth. His voice was like the voice of a demon, causing the youth's eyes to tremble slightly. Then, he hurriedly bowed and answered, "My name is Xiao Yun." "Xiao Yun?" Yi Xian nodded and said, "Good name, but I don't really like this name. I will bestow upon you my surname. From now on, you will be called Yi Xian Demon. I think this name suits you, and you will shine brightly in the future. As long as Senior can save my mother, I will be called Yi Xian Demon from now on. I will be your slave for the rest of my life." The youth did not hesitate, because he knew that the weak had no conditions to negotiate. He knelt at Yi Xian's feet and kowtowed 3 times. "I really like your intelligence and filial piety. Looking at you is like looking at me from back then." Yi Xian's eyes were in a trance as he vaguely remembered the past of his youth. Unfortunately, things had changed, and he was no longer as simple as before. "Xiao Yun, you dare to betray your ancestors?" Although the middle-aged man was afraid of Yi Xian, the youth had actually changed his name. This was simply unacceptable to him. How could he face the youth's dead father? Moreover, if the Xiao clan knew about this, they would definitely make things difficult for the youth. They wanted nothing more than to kill the youth. Wouldn't this give them an excuse? Uncle, it's not that I want to change my name, but in this cruel northern star field, if I want to become stronger, I have to follow a strong person. Moreover, he can save my mother's life. The youth's eyes were red. Yi Xian wasn't moved in the slightest as he looked at the sorrowful expressions of the uncle and nephew. He only indifferently glanced at the middle-aged man as a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. To Yi Xian, raising a demon son was both simple and difficult. However, he already had an idea in his mind. At this moment, the youth still did not know that he had fallen into Yi Xian's control. Although Yi Xian could eliminate all difficulties for him, the moment he met Yi Xian, the trajectory of his life would be completely changed. He did not know whether this was good or bad for him. Chapter 1376. Alas! The middle-aged man sighed. He knew he couldn't change anything. Since the young man had already made his decision, and the black-clothed man in front of him was an expert, perhaps this could be considered a rare opportunity for the young man. Senior, may I know your name? How should I address you? The young man bowed to Yi Xian and asked. My name is Yi Xian. You can call me Mr. Yi Xian said. Yi Xian didn't want to show his real name. After all, he wanted to cultivate to the immortal realm in the Beichen star field. His name was also troublesome. Naturally, he couldn't use his real name. Mister, my mother is suffering from the cold blood disease. Her life is in danger. Please return home with me. After my mother's cold blood disease is cured, I am willing to follow you for the rest of my life, the young man said. It's fine. I have the same intention. Yi Xian smiled and nodded. He looked very kind, but the coldness in his eyes still remained. Mister, after walking out of the ice sea and cold river, we will reach the ice river city. That is my hometown, the young man said loudly. After all, Yi Xian was only a young man. He didn't have the worries of the middle-aged man. He only knew that Yi Xian's cultivation was strong and that he could cure his mother's cold blood disease. As for other things, he didn't care so much. Looking at the young man's happy face, Yi Xian's thoughts drifted. The word, mother, seemed a little distant to him. The kind figure remained in his memory. The young man begged for his mother's illness. Yi Xian's heart softened slightly. If he could restart his life, he wanted to go back to his childhood. He wanted to be with his mother, be filial to her, and never care about the disputes of the mortal world. Unfortunately, he couldn't go back. He was no longer an ignorant and innocent young man. After endless time, he had carried too many things on his back. He was stained with hundreds of millions of deaths. The sea of blood and the sky, the two banks of bones. However, Yi Xian didn't regret it. If he could choose again, he would still embark on this path of cultivation. Looking at Yi Xian's silence, the young man asked carefully, Mister, can we go now? Returning from his thoughts, Yi Xian's eyes drifted. He looked at the vast land of ice and murmured, Let's go. I hope there won't be any problems ahead. Boom. Yi Xian took a step and disappeared with the uncle and nephew. Instantly. Yi Xian. So. Even so, the middle-aged man's face was filled with shock. He wrapped himself and the young man up to block the howling cold wind. The uncle and nephew were shivering, and their lips had already turned the color of snow. In the blink of an eye, the three of them left the land of ice and entered the northern star domain. At this time, the sky was already dark, and the moon was high in the sky. Heavy snow continued to fall from the sky, causing the ground to be wrapped in silver. Under the illumination of the moon, the scene of a world of ice and snow was revealed. It was extremely beautiful, causing Yi Xian to praise it endlessly in his heart. Such a world of snow could only be seen in the northern star domain. However, because the northern star domain was bitterly cold all year round and lacked cultivation resources, the entire northern star domain was filled with slaughter. Ah! Suddenly, the young man shivered. His small face turned red from the cold and his lips were stained with ice. It was obvious that his cultivation wasn't good enough and he had been invaded by the cold air. On the other hand, although the middle-aged man wasn't as bad as the young man, his aura was abnormally dim. He seemed to be lacking in strength. In the face of this cold winter snow, his resistance was extremely weak. Mortals are really pitiful. Yi Xian sighed helplessly as he looked at the situation of the two of them. He'd forgotten that he'd already stepped into the Tao querying realm, so he only treated this cold winter as a peerless beauty. However, the cultivation of the uncle and nephew were too weak, so he treated this journey as a beautiful scenery, but he caused the uncle and nephew to suffer greatly. He was afraid that the cold air between the heavens and earth had already invaded the two of them. If this continued, the two of them would definitely turn into ice sculptures before they could reach Ice River City. It's late. I think the two of you must be hungry. Let's rest for the night. Yi Xian said softly and was about to shoot down. Say, Senior, below is the territory of the ferocious beasts. It's not too late for us to rest after we leave this place. Although the middle-aged man's cultivation wasn't high, he was quite knowledgeable. Below them was a place where the ferocious beasts gathered. If they rested here and the ferocious beasts attacked, they would be buried in the mouths of the ferocious beasts. It's fine. Yi Xian could naturally sense the auras of the many ferocious beasts in the ice forest below. There were even Saint King-level ferocious beasts in the depths of the ice forest. However, to Yi Xian, this was nothing. He didn't care about them at all. As they shot down from the sky and bathed in the snow, Yi Xian and the other two had already descended into the ice forest. These are cedar trees, right? Looking at the many ancient pine trees, the silver-white branches sparkling under the moonlight, Yi Xian couldn't help but sigh in admiration. This kind of beautiful scenery could only be found in the North Star field. It was impossible to see it in any other field. At this moment, the uncle and nephew were focused on rushing back home. However, Yi Xian didn't care. He was more focused on cultivating his body and mind. He was planning a series of things in his mind. How could the uncle and nephew be in the mood to appreciate the beautiful scenery in front of them? The young man was shivering from the cold, while the middle-aged man looked worried. He was constantly looking around, afraid that the ferocious beasts would appear and treat them as food. Senior, I'll go cut some trees to add firewood. The middle-aged man bowed and walked to the side. Not long after, the firewood was lit and a raging bonfire ignited in the ice forest, warming the place. The young man's flushed face gradually became rosy. Shalala. Suddenly, in the depths of the ice forest, the sound of leaves rustling and the roars of ferocious beasts could be heard. The uncle and nephew's sleepy eyes became wide awake. They immediately unsheathed their steel swords, afraid that the ferocious beasts would attack and kill them here. It just so happens that I haven't eaten yet. Here you are, delivering yourself to me. Yi Xian didn't care about the uncle and nephew's actions. He slowly got up and took a step forward, disappearing from the uncle and nephew's sight. As Yi Xian left, the roars of ferocious beasts could be heard from the depths of the ice forest, making the uncle and nephew's hearts palpitate. 10 minutes later, a loud rumbling sound was heard. Yi Xian grabbed a huge ice elephant by its tail and dragged it on the icy ground, slowly walking towards the two of them. Bang! The ice elephant fell to the ground, its huge body causing the earth to tremble. The uncle and nephew also exclaimed in surprise. This is a snow elephant. This is a Saint King-level ferocious beast, right? The young man exclaimed. The middle-aged man was even more shocked. He looked at Yi Xian with fear in his eyes. He had previously guessed that Yi Xian was a great cultivator above the Saint King level, but now it seemed that it wasn't so simple. The mysterious man in black in front of him must be at the Yin-Yang realm. Otherwise, how could he kill a snow elephant in such a short time? This person's identity was mysterious, and his cultivation couldn't be judged by common sense. This was a Saint King-level ferocious beast. If he was only at the creation realm, how could he silently capture and kill such a ferocious beast? Chapter 1377. This ice forest is not too big. We killed a few beasts, but their meat is as tough as rotten wood. We happened to find this ice elephant. It should be delicious to have this beast for dinner. Yi Xian was not a person who cared about food. However, he had been asleep for thousands of years. Although his cultivation had reached the Tao querying realm, his blood and qi were still weak. Although this ice elephant was only at the Saint King level, it could still replenish some of the blood and qi in his body. In the battle that year, Yi Xian had used up all his resources. Although his cultivation was much stronger than before, his blood and qi were in urgent need of replenishment. Moreover, the meat of this ice elephant was tender and delicious. It was one of the best delicacies in the world. How could Yi Xian let go of the chance to see such an ingredient today? Hearing Yi Xian's words, the uncle and nephew unconsciously swallowed their saliva and looked at Yi Xian with fear. This person was simply a ferocious person. How could he kill a few beasts at will? If he did not kill them at will, was he going to slaughter all the beasts in the ice forest? Yi Xian was a young man after all. After recovering from his shock, he said excitedly, "This is an ice elephant. Even when my father was alive, I only remember tasting it once when I was young. It was secretly brought back by my father from a feast." Hearing the young man's words, the middle-aged man had a complicated look in his eyes. Ever since his elder brother passed away, this mother and child had been bullied by the tribe. He was also incompetent and did not take good care of them. "Sir, please take a seat. I will clean this up." The middle-aged man held a steel sword in his hand and quickly went to the ice elephant to clean it up. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, a huge elephant leg was being roasted over a bonfire. The aroma of meat wafted in the air, causing the young man's stomach to growl and his face to flush. As the elephant leg was roasted, the middle-aged man cut off a piece of the juiciest elephant meat and passed it to Yi Xian first. Yi Xian casually bit off a piece of elephant meat and swallowed it. Then he frowned slightly. Although the roasted elephant meat was tender and juicy, the blood and qi in it had evaporated. Yi Xian casually tossed the elephant meat in his hand to the youth. This caused the uncle and nephew to be stunned. Could it be that the elephant meat was difficult to swallow? However, in the next moment, Yi Xian slowly stood up and walked towards the ice snow elephant. What happened next completely shocked the uncle and nephew on the spot, and they sucked in a breath of cold air. Yi Xian opened his mouth and activated the Calamity Transcender technique. The giant ice elephant instantly turned into a pile of bones, and its flesh and blood turned into blood energy that was swallowed by him. Demonic arts? The middle-aged man was shocked and his heart trembled violently. Although he didn't know what kind of technique Yi Xian was using, such a terrifying technique was undoubtedly a demonic technique. This blood qi is really too weak. Yi Xian frowned as he looked at the skeleton of the Ice Sea gigantic elephant. With his Tao querying realm cultivation, the blood qi of this gigantic Ice Sea gigantic elephant was just a drop in the bucket. It wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes turned, and he quietly activated the heaven-burying technique. Countless gray rays of light spread throughout the ice forest, and strange demonic roars resounded between heaven and earth. In the next moment, an extremely shocking thing happened. Rumbling sounds could be heard from the vast ice forest. Pairs of ferocious eyes rose from all directions, accompanied by extremely terrifying roars of beasts. The roars of beasts shook the sky, and a large number of cedar trees collapsed. Hundreds of extremely terrifying beasts appeared and instantly surrounded Yi Xian. The young man cried out in alarm as his face instantly turned deathly pale. Even the middle-aged man broke out in a cold sweat out of fear because the several hundred fierce beasts that had suddenly appeared were all the size of small hills. The aura of each fierce beast was at least at the Saint King realm, and there was no lack of creation realm fierce beasts among them. Yi Xian opened his mouth wide, and a cloud of black mist rose around him. The hundreds of beasts roared in fear, and their flesh instantly melted, turning into pale white skeletons that fell to the ground. Rumble! The blood qi of hundreds of beasts gathered into a river of blood. The rumbling blood river rushed into Yi Xian's mouth, and was swallowed into Yi Xian's stomach. Phew! After 3 breaths, Yi Xian slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His originally thin and weak body was slightly stronger, and his handsome and harmless face was slightly rosy. Although there isn't much blood qi, it can be considered as making up for the lack. Yi Xian muttered. Although he was not very satisfied, his body had begun to regain its vitality, which was a happy thing. In these tens of millions of years, although Yi Xian's cultivation had risen by a level, his physical body was still stagnant from tens of millions of years ago. Yi Xian was a person who paid great attention to physical combat strength. Back then, when he bathed in the supreme blood of the extreme devil, he had already tempered his physical body, causing it to undergo a qualitative change. As long as he absorbed more blood energy to strengthen his physical body, his combat strength would be able to improve even further. Yi Xian's casual action frightened the uncle and nephew, especially the middle-aged man, who looked at Yi Xian with eyes full of fear. "You are a great demon, a terrifying great demon." At this moment, the middle-aged man's heart was trembling. There were great demons in the Northern Star Field, and anyone who could be called a great demon was an extremely vicious and terrifying character. This kind of person was extremely evil and had no taboos. Even some great sects and orthodoxies were not willing to offend them. At this moment, the middle-aged man was very sure that Yi Xian was a terrifying great demon. He was already regretting his involvement with Yi Xian. However, the middle-aged man did not notice that besides fear, the youth's eyes were also red with excitement when he looked at Yi Xian. This kind of demonic light was extremely stagnant. Clearly, Yi Xian's actions had deeply touched his demonic heart. The night passed without a word. The ice forest fell into silence. Later on, the uncle and nephew also fell into a deep sleep. With a ferocious person like Yi Xian here, the ice forest was deathly silent. The hundreds of fierce beast skeletons added a frightening atmosphere to the atmosphere. As the sun rose, sunlight sprinkled down on the earth, adding a touch of vitality to this bitterly cold land. The uncle and nephew had already woken up. Looking at Yi Xian sitting cross-legged in the void, they did not dare to disturb him. Only when Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of turbid air did the night's cultivation come to an end. "Let's go!" With their auras connected, Yi Xian brought his uncle and nephew into the air and shot towards the direction of Ice River City. Glacier City was located at the border of the Northern Star Field. It was an extremely famous holy land for cultivation. A river of ice slowly flowed around the city, with bits of ice floating in the water. This river of ice was the source of drinking water for the city. It was even revered as a holy river by the citizens of Glacier City. In such a harsh environment, obtaining water was a difficult problem. With such a source of water, Glacier City was built around it. Chapter 1378. It was a cold winter, and the northern wind was biting cold. On the road to Ice River City, 3 figures were slowly approaching. Looking at the outline of the city ahead, the youth's face was filled with excitement. He and his uncle had gone to the glaciers for half a year. It was a journey of 100,000 miles, and it was unknown how much hardship they had endured. However, it only took them a day to return. Although they had suffered the pain of the cold wind, the youth still enjoyed it. Not only had they found the extreme ice fox, but they had also brought back a mysterious expert. His mother could finally be saved. How could the youth not be excited? During this day's journey, Yi Xian also understood why his uncle and nephew had gone to the glaciers. The middle-aged man was the youth's uncle, Xiao Changhe. The youth's father was originally a cultivation genius of the Xiao family. Although he was not the patriarch, he was vaguely known as the #1 person in the Xiao family. What a pity! This great world was very cruel. Even a genius would die young, especially in the bitter cold of the northern region. As everyone knew, the northern region was bitterly cold, and cultivators relied on vicious beasts as their resources. The Xiao family was also a famous family in Ice River City, comparable to a medium-sized sect, and had a heritage of more than 100,000 years. Naturally, they would organize cultivators in the family to go to places where vicious beasts gathered and hunt. And then a regrettable thing happened. During a hunting trip, they encountered a giant ice sea beast, and all the family members were killed. Xiao Yun's father also died in that hunt, leaving behind a widow and an orphan in the Xiao family, struggling at death's door. When it rains, it pours. After hearing the news, Xiao Yun's mother was already weak and sickly. After several years of grief, her cold blood disease broke out, and her life was in danger. This made the youth even more distressed. With the help of his uncle, Xiaocheng, he learned from the shamans in the family that there was an extreme ice fox in the glaciers. As long as he took its blood and had a small saint perform blood transfusion, his mother would naturally be cured. After hearing this news, the youth asked the elders in the family to help him. He hoped that they could send cultivators to the glaciers to hunt down the extreme ice fox and cure his mother's illness. However, the elders in the family were indifferent to the youth's request. The answer they gave him was also very simple. The distance between Ice River City and the land of glaciers was 100,000 miles. The journey was fraught with danger. How could they waste the clan's resources for a weak woman? In the harsh environment of the North Star domain, not only were the ferocious beasts a resource, but the cultivators of the sects and families were also the greatest resource. Although Xiao Yun's father was known as the #1 person in the Xiao family when he was alive, he had already passed away. This was how cruel the major clans were. Things that had no value to them were not worth wasting their resources on. Not only the Xiao clan was like this, the other major sects were the same. Yi Xian could also see the cruelty of the North Star domain from the young man's description. In this bitter cold land of the northern region, only the strong were respected, and only the fittest survived. All resources could only be given to the living. However, Yi Xian liked this kind of rule very much. But to the youth, it was filled with coldness and ruthlessness. He had no sense of belonging to his family. As the three of them approached the city gate, a stone bridge crossing the river came into view of Yi Xian. Looking at the city covered in silver, Yi Xian's eyes deepened. He wondered if his trip to the North Star domain would allow him to enter the immortal realm. "Look, the uncle and nephew are back!" Exclamations rang out from the city gate, causing the soldiers guarding the city to look at Yi Xian's group. They didn't die? Did they hunt the extreme ice fox? Some cultivators who had returned from hunting whispered. Yi Xian's eyes shone with a strange light as he looked at the cultivators in front of the city gate. Their burly figures and ferocious faces were filled with explosive muscles. These cultivators of the northern region were full of vigor and vitality. They did not have the ethereal feeling of ordinary cultivators. Instead, they had a fierce aura. Clearly, they were all ruthless people. "Mister, we have arrived at Ice River City. Please go ahead." After returning to his homeland, the youth did not forget about Yi Xian. He was even more respectful towards him. Hearing the youth's words, Yi Xian smiled faintly. He walked across the stone bridge and entered the city gate. The uncle and nephew followed closely behind. The three of them quickly entered the city. Many cultivators who had returned to Ice River City at the same time watched the three of them enter the city. All kinds of whispers rang out again. "Hey, did you see that? The thing on Xiao Yun's waist seems to be the extreme ice fox? I saw it long ago. This kid really has the demeanor of his father. The Ice Sea is 100,000 miles away from Ice River City. He must have suffered a lot along the way. Humph. Are you really ignorant or are you pretending to be ignorant? Although the extreme ice fox is just an ordinary fierce beast, it is extremely cunning and its speed is as fast as lightning. Even with Xiao Changhe by his side, how could it be so easy to catch it?" "That's right. This brother is right. Didn't you see that the black-clothed man was only wearing a thin robe? I saw that this person's qi and blood are vigorous. I'm afraid that he is a grand cultivator. Maybe he is a small saint." Someone said with certainty, guessing Yi Xian's identity. "This brother means, could it be that this black-clothed man helped Xiao Yun to hunt the extreme ice fox?" "Ha!" A mocking laugh rang out. A cultivator shook his head and sighed. "Even if this person is a small saint, so what? The blood of the extreme ice fox is extremely precious. If his father was still alive, he could naturally use it to cure this kid's mother's illness. However, this kid's father has already passed away. Xiao family is a big family. How could they let such a precious thing be used by a weak woman?" As this person's words rang out, everyone showed a helpless expression and nodded in agreement. The Northern Star Field was a bitter cold place. Cultivation resources were the most scarce. Xiao Yun was just a child and did not have the cultivation of his father. Such a precious resource naturally had to be used on a living person. This was also the cruel law of the Northern Star Field. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. This sentence fully explained the survival of the Northern Star Field. At this moment, Yi Xian and the other two had already entered the Ice River City. With the cultivation of the uncle and nephew, they naturally could not hear the discussion in front of the city gate. However, Yi Xian's cultivation was very high. Even if a mosquito landed on the ground, he could hear it, let alone the discussion of the crowd. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. Looking at the excited expression of the young man, a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. This was just the beginning. Aristocratic families all had their own schemes. All kinds of shady dealings happened from time to time. Back in the human world, Yi Xian had experienced the cruelty of the Yi family when he was young. He had already predicted what would happen. However, wasn't this what Yi Xian was looking forward to? If he wanted to cultivate a devil's son, he had to let him understand the cruelty of this world. Only then could he draw out his devil heart and truly use it for his own use. Yi Xian had never pitied anyone, nor did he have any compassion. He only believed in himself. Only when he was strong could he truly be fearless of any tribulations. Looking at this young man, Yi Xian seemed to see himself in the past. He was also an abandoned child of his family, living lowly in the mortal world. The 6 desires are emotionless. Heaven and earth have no heart. Incarnate into a devil, the greatest of all time. Don't disappoint me. Yi Xian muttered softly. Chapter 1379. Mister, what did you say? Hearing Yi Xian's murmur, the youth was confused and asked. Nothing. Since you've agreed to save your mother, then don't delay any further. Let's go. Yi Xian said indifferently. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the youth nodded heavily and then quickly walked towards the Xiao family. His clan uncle, Xiao Chenghe, slightly frowned. He didn't know why, but his mind was always tense. It was because ever since he met Yi Xian he'd always felt uneasy, as if something extremely terrifying was about to happen. The 3 of them quickly rushed to the Xiao family, causing the people in the city to stop and watch. Looking at Yi Xian's thin clothes, everyone's eyes were filled with surprise and awe. This was their reverence for the strong. It had to be known that the bitter cold of the Northern Star Domain wasn't just ordinary cold. It was a cold current that appeared between heaven and earth. This kind of cold current penetrated deep into the bones. If a mortal didn't cultivate some powerful blood chi techniques, it would be very difficult for them to survive in the northern region. And Yi Xian's thin clothes also proved that his cultivation was very strong. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the people on both sides of the street gradually thinned out. Yi Xian also saw the endless white jade pavilions. 2 Pai Xiao sat on either side of a 10-meter-tall black jade door. There were also 2 bright-eyed cultivators guarding both sides of the door. 2 large words were written on a white gold plaque on a black background, Xiao family. Mister, this is the Xiao family. My mother is in the side courtyard. The youth spoke in a low voice. He was biting his lips so hard that a trace of blood flowed out. The words, Xiao family, and side courtyard, were heavily emphasized by him. It was obvious that there was some secret behind it. Xiao Yun, don't show such emotions when you enter the Xiao family. If someone with ulterior motives tells the elders, both you and I will be punished, Xiao Chenghe warned solemnly. Yes, uncle. Knowing that his emotions were fluctuating, the youth bowed and accepted the order, suppressing his resentment towards his family. His name is not Xiao Yun. His name is Yi Xuanma. I can forgive you this time, but don't do it again. Yi Xian glanced at Xiao Chenghe indifferently. This also made Xiao Chenghe's heart tremble. He could only nod stiffly. Although Yi Xian didn't release any aura, just a glance from him made Xiao Chenghe's soul tremble. Let's go. Take me to see your mother and fulfill your last wish, Yi Xian said calmly and walked towards the door. However, Yi Xian's actions shocked the uncle and nephew duo. They had forgotten something important and hadn't told Yi Xian about it. This was the main entrance of the Xiao mansion. Only honored guests or clan elders could enter through it. Everyone else had to enter through the side entrance. The two of them were preoccupied with Mother Zhao's matter and actually forgot to inform Yi Xian of this matter. Say, "Sir, the main entrance is for honored guests. We need to enter through the side entrance," the youth said shamefully. He didn't dare to look Yi Xian in the eye. Hearing the youth's words, Yi Xian's expression froze. Then he said calmly, "If I'm not an honored guest, then who in this world is?" It wasn't that Yi Xian was arrogant, but that he indeed had the right to be. What was a small Shao mansion in his eyes? Not to mention that he had just entered the path-seeking realm, just the fact that he had killed the Lord of the Extreme Demon was already known to the entire primal chaos. He could destroy such a large clan with a flick of his finger. If Yi Xian still entered through the side entrance, wouldn't it be a joke if the world found out about this? Although Yi Xian didn't care about the Shao family, his real target was the youth. Otherwise, why would he be willing to set foot here? Yi Xian strolled towards the main entrance of the Shao mansion. A trace of playfulness flashed across his eyes. An interesting show was about to begin. The three's actions had already attracted the attention of the cultivators guarding the gate. When they saw the uncle and nephew return, the two guards were already surprised. Now Yi Xian, a stranger, was actually going to enter through the main entrance. Was this person crazy? After all, this was the Shao mansion of the Ice River City. Not just anyone could act so presumptuously here. "Stop!" The two guards shouted in unison. They unsheathed their long swords. At first glance, they looked very imposing. My two cousins, please wait." They had just returned to the Shao family. The uncle and nephew didn't expect this to happen. Along the way, Yi Xian had become more and more unfathomable in their eyes. Even so, the uncle and nephew didn't think that Yi Xian could fight against the Shao family. No one knew the terror of the Shao family better than the uncle and nephew. "Cousins? Shao Yun, you're just a mere mortal. What qualifications do you have to call us cousins?" One of the guards said disdainfully. The gaze he used to look at the youth was filled with contempt. A trace of humiliation flashed in the youth's eyes. At the side, Shao Changhe's expression was even gloomier. Although his cultivation was much higher than the two guards, they were guarding the entrance of the Shao family. They represented the face of the Shao family. They weren't people he could offend. "If I were the two of you, I would quickly inform the patriarch that an honored guest has arrived," Yi Xian said indifferently. "Mr. Th?" Looking at Yi Xian's fearless expression, the youth Shao Yun's expression became anxious. "Inform the patriarch? An honored guest has arrived? Ha!" The two guards looked at each other and laughed wildly. They looked at Yi Xian as if they were looking at an idiot. "Chi!" Suddenly, the two guards brandished their long blades and slashed towards Yi Xian. Their expressions were ferocious as they said, "Kid, remember in your next life that there are some places where you can't be so presumptuous." They didn't say much. The two guards weren't weak and were the face of the Shao family. They would definitely kill anyone who dared to be presumptuous in the Shao family as a warning to others. "Wait a moment." Such a scene caused the uncle and nephew to cry out in alarm. Their eyes were filled with fear. The two of them weren't afraid that Yi Xian would die under their blades, but they were afraid that the two guards would die at the hands of Yi Xian. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the two guards, the uncle and nephew were pleading for them to show mercy. This caused the two guards to smile cruelly, and the steel blades that were slashing towards Yi Xian became even more ferocious. "Kid, remember, you must be merciless when facing your enemies. Only then can you slaughter your way to a place that belongs to you." Yi Xian turned around to look at the youth. He didn't make any movements, but his eyes slightly rotated, causing the surrounding space to instantly distort. Bang! Bang! The void exploded as flesh and blood flew everywhere. The two long blades turned into bubbles, and the two guards strangely exploded into two masses of flesh and blood, staining the ground with scarlet blood. "Let's go." Yi Xian seemed to have done something very casual. He strolled into the Shao residence, not even glancing at the two pieces of flesh and blood on the ground. Hiss! Killing without a word. The uncle and nephew sucked in a breath of cold air, their bodies and minds trembling. The uncle and nephew looked at each other with worry in their eyes. However, they had already come to this point and it was too late to redeem themselves. They could only follow Yi Xian into the Shao residence. In the Shao residence, Yi Xian walked forward with his hands behind his back, admiring the scenery in the Shao residence. The uncle and nephew looked worried as they led the way in front without saying a word. Yun. Demon Yun, when the senior is done treating your mother, you can go with him and never come back. Shao Changhe secretly transmitted his voice to the youth with an extremely serious expression. Chapter 1380. Yes. The youth nodded heavily. Leading an outsider into the Shao residence and killing 2 guards was a crime that would definitely be severely punished in the Shao residence. His aptitude was mediocre and was not valued by the Shao clan. It was fine if he was killed by the Shao clan, but he could not implicate this Mr. and fall here. In the youth's heart, the Shao clan was an insurmountable colossus. His heart was filled with reverence for the Shao clan. Even if Yi Xian displayed a powerful killing method, the youth still believed that Yi Xian could not resist the Shao clan. Worried about this matter, the youth quickened his pace and constantly passed through the Shao residence. Along the way, the 3 of them naturally encountered many people from the Shao residence. Seeing the return of the uncle and nephew, the many servants and maids in the residence revealed astonishment in their eyes. Some even quickly rushed to the main residence to report this matter. Feeling the gazes of the crowd, the uncle and nephew's figures sped up even more, and the worry on their faces became more and more serious. The 2 of them did not say a word as they brought Yi Xian to the Shao residence's side courtyard. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the 3 of them were already in the Shao residence's side courtyard. Looking at the so-called Shao residence's side courtyard, a profound look flashed across Yi Xian's eyes. He finally understood why the youth's emotions fluctuated so violently when he mentioned the Shao residence's side courtyard. The so-called side courtyard was actually a place where livestock were kept. The smell of livestock feces constantly emitted from the side courtyard, making people want to vomit. Mother! Yuner is back. Without waiting for the side courtyard's door to open, the youth shouted loudly and quickly ran towards the side courtyard's door. The slightly broken door was pushed open by the youth, and the scene in the courtyard was reflected in Yi Xian's eyes. A large number of pigs, cows, and other livestock were kept in enclosures. The dense smell of feces assaulted Yi Xian's face, causing Yi Xian to frown slightly. Mother! The youth's anxious voice continuously sounded, but there was no response from the side courtyard. This caused the uncle and nephew to reveal uneasy expressions. A door was quickly pushed open by the youth. In the messy room, there was no one on the bed. The table and chairs on the ground were already broken, and there were even some miscellaneous items scattered on the ground, as if there had been a smashing here. Mother! Where's Mother? Looking at the scene in the house, the young man clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with madness, and the red light in his eyes began to flicker. Is Xiaoyun back? All of a sudden, a weak voice sounded out, causing Yi Xian to look towards the source of the voice. Outside the door, there was a young man dressed as a servant. His face was yellow and his body was thin and weak. He looked at the 3 people in the courtyard and his voice sounded a little timid. When the youth heard this voice, it was as if he had grasped at a life-saving straw. He quickly came to the manservant's side and asked anxiously, "Why isn't my mother here? Do you know where she went?" Annie. The manservant hesitated as hesitation flashed through his eyes. An extremely uneasy feeling rose from the bottom of Xiao Yun's heart. He suddenly grabbed the manservant's shoulders and shook him. "What happened to my mother? Hurry up and tell me." Auntie was sent to the returning heavens court by the 2nd prince yesterday. I'm afraid. Hearing the manservant's words, the young man felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was completely stunned. "Xiaoyunda, I'm going to kill you." The young man roared angrily. The aura around him was extremely chaotic. A terrifying red light flashed through his eyes. "Where is the returning heavens court?" Yi Xian slowly walked over with a playful smile. The manservant did not dare to delay and quickly explained the situation of the returning heaven's court. Returning heaven's court. As the name implied, anyone who entered this place did not belong to the mortal world. They would be fed a kind of poisonous grass and would fall into a deep sleep, never to wake up. This sounded nice, but it was actually a kind of euthanasia. This was an institution that every family had to set up. Killing the useless could save the family's resources. Hearing the manservant's words, Yi Xian looked deeply at the youth and said, "Your mother was just sent to the returning heaven's court yesterday. Is there still a chance to save her?" The youth instantly woke up. He suddenly regained his senses and said in an extremely urgent voice, "The returning heaven's court only gives out the poisonous grass every 3 days. How many days has it been since the last time the poisonous grass was given out?" The youth suddenly looked at the manservant and asked anxiously, "Today just happens to be the 3rd day. I'm afraid Auntie Shi." The manservant stuttered, "I want to save my mother." Without waiting for the manservant to finish speaking, the youth suddenly charged out of the door and rushed in the direction of the returning heaven's court. At this moment, Xiao Changhe was extremely cold. His body trembled uncontrollably as extreme guilt appeared in his eyes. When his elder brother was still alive, how could the mother and son live in a side courtyard? They even had servants serving them. He never thought that after his elder brother's death, the mother and son would be chased to a side courtyard to live with these animals, while his elder brother's wife would be sent to the returning heaven's court. This caused Xiao Changhe to clench his fists tightly. His nails dug into his palms and blood flowed out without him noticing. "Senior, this junior will never be able to repay the great kindness you have shown to my uncle and nephew. Leave from the side door. Walk another 3 li and you will reach the back door of the Xiao residence. Please leave as soon as possible." Xiao Changhe cried out sorrowfully. A mournful expression appeared around him as he turned into a gust of wind and rushed towards the returning heaven's court. Watching the uncle and nephew leave, Yi Xian's face was expressionless. He looked at the flying snow and the corners of his mouth curled into a merciless smile. There were many tragic things in this world. If he did not appear, this youth would be miserable. Today would probably be the day of his death. The void trembled and ripples spread. Yi Xian took a step forward and instantly disappeared from the side courtyard, leaving the manservant in a daze. His eyes were filled with confusion. Returning heaven's court. The middle-aged manager had his hands behind his back. 2 servants held 2 trays in the palms of their hands. Dozens of jade bottles appeared on top of the trays. In front of the manager were dozens of old, weak women, children, and people with broken limbs. At this moment, they were all kneeling on the ground. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were filled with the color of death. It was as if they had become the living dead. "You are a member of the Xiao family in life and a ghost of the Xiao family in death. The returning heaven's herb is a blessing given to you by the family. Why aren't you thanking us?" The middle-aged manager said indifferently. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at the dozens of old, weak women and children. "Thank you for the family's blessing." The voices of the dozens of people were like mosquitoes and flies. Facing the arrival of death, not only did they not cry out in fear, they instead felt a kind of relief. In this cruel world, living had become torture. Perhaps death was a kind of relief for them. "I still haven't seen my Yun. I definitely won't die." Suddenly, in the crowd, a woman in green muttered. Although she was wearing a rough hemp garment and her face was pale, her exquisite face was a rare beauty. Her temperament was dignified and graceful, unlike the people beside her who were all emitting a deathly aura. Chapter 1381. Hearing the young woman's words, the middle-aged steward's eyes flashed with regret. It was such a pity that such a beautiful woman was going to be killed by the family. If he could pamper this woman, his 30 years as a steward would not be in vain. After all, this woman was once the wife of the first genius of the Xiao family. What a pity! This woman was definitely not someone he could touch. Yingling Xue, you suffer from cold blood disease and live in pain all year round. How dare you say such nonsense after being blessed by the family? The middle-aged steward frowned and reprimanded her. Although he could not disrespect the high and mighty young mistress of the Shao family, reprimanding her made the middle-aged steward's vanity soar. My death is not to be regretted, but before I die, I just want to see my Yun. The green-robed woman bit her lips tightly, giving off a pitiful feeling. This was also her greatest wish before she died. Humph! The uncle and nephew are full of themselves. They went to the ice sea to hunt for the extreme Een ice fox. I'm afraid they have already died on the way. Don't be delusional. Go to heaven today. No, my son will never die. Lingxue choked with sobs and rebuked loudly. Stubborn. Send them to heaven. Lingxue's beauty did not arouse the slightest pity for those who were about to die. The two servants were emotionless. They walked to the crowd with trays in their hands and handed out jade bottles to the old, weak, women and children. At this moment, no one was really unafraid of death. Facing death head-on, the dozens of people who were about to die finally had a trace of fear in their eyes. But even so, they knew that their time was up. My husband worked hard for the family all his life and was eventually devoured by a ferocious beast. But the family is heartless and sends us to heaven. Such a family makes me feel bitter and hateful. An old woman laughed wildly. She laughed and laughed until tears flowed out of her eyes. Then she suddenly pulled out the cork and drank the liquid in the bottle. Bang! His body fell to the ground powerlessly and slowly stiffened. However, his eyes, which were filled with unwillingness before his death, refused to close. The middle-aged steward seemed to be used to such a scene and did not care. He looked indifferently at the dozens of people who were about to die and spoke slowly. Don't hesitate. Save the family's resources and be free. This is a great kindness. Crack! The ear-piercing sound of a jade bottle shattering rang out. The middle-aged steward's face darkened as he looked at Lingxue. Lingxue, I'll call you young madam again. I hope you won't make a mistake. Don't force me to do anything to you. You'd better go back now and leave the last dignity of the young madam of the Shao family. Men, give young mistress another bottle of heaven-returning elixir. Not only did you help Yun catch the extreme Een ice fox, but you'll also cure mother's cold and blood disease. Mother, when you recover, will leave the Shao family and never come back. Ha! All of a sudden, there was a sinister laugh. The middle-aged steward walked forward and said with a ferocious expression, Little bastard, I didn't expect you to not die. You even brought back the extreme Een ice fox? Looking at the ferocious beast on the young man's waist, the middle-aged steward's eyes flashed with greed. This kind of spiritual creature was hard to find. He didn't expect the young man to really hunt it down and return to the Shao family to save Lingxue. Destroying the returning to heaven ceremony is a serious crime. Hand over the extreme Een ice fox and go to the Hall of Penal Law to plead guilty. The middle-aged steward said coldly, showing his authority. This ice fox is my mother's life-saving medicine. How can I give it to you? Hearing the middle-aged steward's words, the young man roared with hatred in his eyes. Take your mother and senior first. I'll stop him. Xiao Changhe took a step forward and a violent aura surged around him. He was ready to fight to the death. With just you? The middle-aged steward sneered. Xiao Changhe, if you don't want to die, you'd better get out of my way. Boring. Without waiting for Xiao Changhe to make a move, Yi Xian's eyes rotated, and a scene that made everyone panic appeared. Flesh and blood turned into bones, and bones turned into ashes. The time in this space seemed to be reversed. The middle-aged steward completely turned into nothingness and never appeared in this world again. Let's go. Indifferent and silent, Yi Xian walked out of the returning to heaven courtyard as if he was taking a stroll in the park. No one clearly saw how the middle-aged manager died, but everyone knew that it was definitely Yi Xian's doing. However, to silently turn a person into dust, this simply caused one's body and mind to tremble to the extreme. Lingxue's eyes flashed with shock as she looked at Yi Xian's departing figure. The uncle and nephew were completely dumbstruck, and the rest of the old, weak women and children, as well as the two servants, were even trembling. Mother, let's go. With Sir here, no one can hurt us. The young man helped Ying Lingxue up. The mother and son quickly followed Yi Xian's footsteps and returned to the side courtyard. As Yi Xian and the others left, the servants on both sides screamed and fled. The whole Shao family was in complete chaos. In the side courtyard, Yi Xian's eyes turned, and many domestic animals turned into ashes and dissipated between heaven and earth. With a wave of his hand, a violent cold wind blew, and the smell of feces in the entire side courtyard dissipated. At this moment, Ying Lingxue looked at Yi Xian's back with an inexplicable look in her eyes. When her beautiful eyes flickered, it was as if she had made some kind of decision. Sir, can you really fight against the Shao family? After rescuing his mother, the young man's depression dissipated. He asked Yi Xian tentatively. Fight. Yi Xian smiled. However, he didn't answer this question because this question was too much of a joke in his opinion. Yun, don't be rude to Sir. Ying Lingxue pretended to reprimand and walked toward Yi Xian. Then she bowed and said, Thank you for your help, Sir. Lingxue pays her respects to you. This woman was so scheming. With just a glance, Yi Xian could see two words in her eyes. Ambition. Very greedy ambition. This woman's performance was graceful and elegant. Her appearance was also peerless, and her figure was curvaceous. She was like a ripe peach that made people want to pick her. However, this woman's every move and action revealed her feminine charm. To put it bluntly, this woman was seducing him. Yes, she was seducing him. Yi Xian smiled, but his smile was very strange. A cold look flashed across his eyes. Chapter 1382. The strong were respected, and the weak were servants. Not to mention the cruel environment of the Beichen Star Field, this rule was also followed in the Central Territory. Yi Xian had already faintly guessed what kind of goal this woman in front of him had. Although this woman was already married and her body was filled with a mature charm, she was indeed a rare beauty. However, in Yi Xian's opinion, she was only SOSO. It was impossible for him to have any thoughts about her. In fact, in Yi Xian's heart, this woman had already been sentenced to death. Although she was still alive, she just hadn't encountered the right time. Madam, you're too polite. You haven't been cleared of the poison, and you have cold blood in your body. You don't have to be so courteous, Yi Xian said with a faint smile. Lingxue doesn't dare to forget Sir's great kindness. However, as members of the Shao family, we have already violated the family rules. I'm afraid we can't be kind today. Ying Lingxue was not a peerless beauty. She was just a graceful young woman, but often this kind of mature and charming young woman was the most attractive to men. At this moment, her face was full of sadness, which made people want to cherish her. At this moment, Shao Changhe frowned slightly. He had a panoramic view of his sister-in-law's appearance, and a touch of shame and indignation flashed through his eyes. Shao Changhe knew very well what kind of person Ying Lingxue was. She was an extremely proud and strange woman. Except for the tender treatment she gave to her dead brother, she usually wouldn't look at any man, let alone show such a weak and pitiful appearance at this moment. Shao Changhe was not stupid. He had already faintly seen that his sister-in-law's wife was showing goodwill to Yi Xian and was faintly tempting him. Although this kind of temptation was very subtle, it was real. Shao Changhe felt ashamed and indignant. He wanted to remind Ying Lingxue, but when he opened his mouth, he saw Ying Lingxue giving him a fierce look. This made him sigh helplessly and then lower his eyes. Sad and lamentable. In order to survive, the only way out was to rely on the strong. Shao Changhe had already understood Ying Lingxue's meaning. At this moment, the atmosphere was a little strange. Only the young boy, who was young and ignorant, did not notice the strange atmosphere. Instead, because his mother had been rescued, his little face was full of excitement. I have an affinity with this child. I once promised him in the IC that I would cure your cold blood disease. I will not sit by and watch you and your child suffer this calamity. Yi Xian looked at Ying Lingxue indifferently, which made the young woman's face turn pale. It was as if her thoughts were seen through by Yi Xian. She looked slightly embarrassed and felt ashamed. Yi Xian's lips curled into a playful smile, and then he chuckled. As expected of a great clan, you're not too late. As Yi Xian's words fell, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out continuously. The entire void rumbled as if thunderclouds were descending. Several streaks of light shot into the courtyard, and 3 white-haired old men appeared. Xiao Yuning Lingxue, how dare you? An elder with a rough face took a step forward, his voice exploding like thunder. Ninth elder. Looking at the 3 elders, Xiao Chenghe exclaimed, and his face instantly turned pale. Xiao Chenghe, you still know that I'm the 9th elder? I thought you had forgotten the clan rules and treated us elders as nothing. Yingling Xue, as the daughter-in-law of the Xiao clan, you are a member of the Xiao clan for life. Although your husband is dead, the rules of the Xiao clan are as such. Useless people must die. The 8th elder spoke gloomily, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Chenghe, I'll give you a chance. Capture the mother and son, and your sins will be forgiven. The 7th elder said in a low voice. Looking at the 3 elders of the Xiao clan, Yi Xian looked at them indifferently. From beginning to end, there were no ripples. The mother and son were abandoned by the clan due to their low cultivation. Xiao Chenghe was the backbone of the Xiao clan, and he was the clan's resource. Naturally, they would forgive Xiao Chenghe. Although this kind of survival rule was cruel, Yi Xian had to admit that according to this system, the clan would indeed prosper and remain in a flourishing state. However, Yi Xian didn't think this system would be flawless. This kind of ruthless family system had its advantages and disadvantages. If a heaven-defying monster appeared and turned against the clan, it would also be the time of the clan's annihilation. Brat, you're the one who killed my Xiao clan's guards and my steward? The 3 elders looked at Yi Xian with cold, murderous intent. They had already received news that the uncle and nephew had brought back an outsider, who was obviously an expert invited by them. However, the Xiao clan had always been used to being strong. They didn't think that the uncle and nephew could invite any expert to go against the Xiao clan, so they naturally didn't put Yi Xian in their eyes. The people of the world are ignorant. They always think that they are the main characters of the world, but they don't know that they are just ants floating in the air. The stars won't revolve for a single person. Even if an ant disappears, the world will continue to revolve. This is the cruel world. Yi Xian said indifferently. He was talking about the truth of the world, and also lamenting about these ignorant ants. Brat, I don't know what you're talking about. You're presumptuous in my Xiao clan. Today, I'll take your dog life. The 3 elders shouted in unison. The aura of a minor saint spread out, and the whole world rumbled. It also attracted the attention of the main family of the Xiao clan. How can the light of a firefly compete with the brilliance of the moon? Facing the terrifying killing intent of the 3 elders, Yi Xian shook his head in boredom. He could kill these 3 ants with a flick of his finger. With his current cultivation base, it was like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the 3 elders were furious. This outsider actually dared to treat them like ants? When they came here, they had already made preparations. If Yi Xian was a grand cultivator, they would definitely appease him and never mention the matter of the mother and son. If Yi Xian joined the Xiao clan, the matter of the mother and son would naturally be forgotten. However, if Yi Xian wasn't a grand cultivator, they would definitely kill him and let the people of Ice River City know that the Xiao clan wasn't a place where anyone could be presumptuous. When the 3 elders arrived here, although they couldn't see through Yi Xian's cultivation base, they could feel that Yi Xian's aura was extremely ordinary. There wasn't the aura of a grand cultivator on him. Obviously, he was only a minor saint at most. How could the 3 of them be afraid of this brat? The 3 of them felt relieved. Naturally, they ignored Yi Xian and came here to question the mother and son directly. But now, Yi Xian actually treated them like ants. How could the 3 elders who had been in high positions for a long time tolerate this? Monstrous anger rose in their hearts. They must kill Yi Xian. Die! The 3 elders roared. Their aura of a minor saint was released violently. They stomped on the ground and shot towards Yi Xian violently. The whole Xiao clan trembled as if it was going to collapse. Chapter 1383. This is really boring. Yi Xian murmured to himself as he looked at their ignorant and fearless attitude. It was a little overkill for him to kill 3 minor saints with his Tao querying cultivation. However, he had no choice but to do it for the sake of this young man. It's too late to regret now. Even if you kneel down and beg for mercy, I will still take your life. The 3 of them appeared in front of Yi Xian and unleashed all kinds of techniques. The void seemed to be on the verge of being torn apart. The 3 of them were determined to kill Yi Xian. Buzz. The void trembled and ripples spread out. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were moving slightly and a wisp of the power of time flashed across his eyes. Time and space were still and the world was distorted. The world seemed to be extremely viscous as the boundless power of time spread out. Before the 3 of them could attack Yi Xian, an extremely terrifying scene appeared. Boom! Their flesh and blood melted and their bones turned into ashes. The 3 of them didn't even have time to scream before they completely disappeared from the world, leaving not even a trace of ashes behind. Ah! Such a scene made the people of Shao Mansion who had been spying on the scene cry out in alarm. The sound of fleeing footsteps could be heard continuously from outside the side courtyard. It's so boring. A snowflake fell on Yi Xian's hair. The hem of his black robe fluttered in the cold wind. Yi Xian said in a low voice as he strolled towards the mother and son. Madam, please clean yourself first. I will expel your illness at night, Yi Xian said calmly as he came in front of Ying Lingxue. As Yi Xian's words fell, Ying Lingxue woke up from her shock. Her pale cheeks flashed with a blush. Then, she nodded and quickly returned to her room. Yi Xian was slightly startled when he felt the girl's shyness. His eyes became deeper and deeper. Yi Xian's words just now were a bit inappropriate, but it was already too late to redeem himself. Moreover, he didn't care about the etiquette of the mortal world. After all, he wasn't the slightest bit interested in this woman. At most, she was just a tool for him to use. Senior, please come into the room. Shao Changhe had already respected Yi Xian as a deity. He was very sure that Yi Xian's cultivation was absolutely unimaginably high. Shao Changhe's expression became even more respectful. That's not appropriate. There are women in the room. I'll stay in the courtyard and enjoy the snowy scenery. Yi Shao Changhe nodded. Shao Changhe bitterly smiled and nodded. He already understood Yi Xian's intentions, so he didn't force him. Moreover, Ying Lingxue was his sister-in-law after all. It would be hard for him to accept a strange man moving in with her. The night was like water as snowflakes drifted down. The entire side courtyard fell into silence. Only Yi Xian, who was sitting on the stone bench, seemed to have turned into an ice sculpture that merged with the snow that filled the sky. Ever since the 3 elders were killed by Yi Xian, the entire Shao clan had become strangely silent. No one came to provoke him, causing Yi Xian to calm down. Senior, I've prepared everything according to your instructions. The uncle and nephew walked over. The young man bowed to Yi Xian. Yi Xian slowly got up. The ice and snow around him suddenly melted. He walked into the room with the uncle and nephew, ready to treat Ying Lingxue. The door was opened. The unique fragrance of a woman poured into his nose. Yi Xian's face froze and he frowned slightly. Yi Xian didn't notice the woman's fragrance when he left the room with the uncle and nephew in a hurry. But when Yi Xian dispersed the smell of poultry, the woman's fragrance became stronger. But what embarrassed Yi Xian the most was that he had told Ying Lingxue to clean herself first. It wasn't because he had some dirty thoughts, but because he wanted to get rid of the poison and cold blood in her body. He had to invade her body with blood qi to accelerate the circulation of qi and blood. Only then could he get half the result with twice the effort. But in the woman's ears, it sounded extremely ambiguous. This also made Yi Xian feel strange when he was about to step into the woman's room. Senior, what's wrong with you? Seeing Yi Xian step forward, the young man asked in confusion. After all, Shao Changhe was an adult. Sensing the hesitation in Yi Xian's heart, he hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian and said, Senior, if you want to use some methods that aren't easy to show to others, my uncle and nephew can retreat first. The uncle and nephew's words made Yi Xian come back to his senses. When did he become so indecisive? It was just the blood palace manipulation method. Moreover, this woman was not worthy of his attention at all. But the blood palace manipulation method, you two can watch from the side, Yi Xian said softly. Without any hesitation, he pushed open the wooden door of the room and stepped in. As the three of them entered the room, the scene in the room was reflected in Yi Xian's eyes. A deep look flashed across his eyes. At this time, Ying Lingxue, after freshening up, seemed to be a different person. Her slightly messy hair was tied up. Her dignified and charming appearance was like a peach blossom in full bloom. A unique charm of a young woman leaped out. The neat white palace gauze was spotless. Obviously, this woman had dressed up meticulously, reproducing the makeup of the former young madam of the Shao family. Compared with the coarse linen clothes from before, it was indeed much more beautiful. Watching Yi Xian enter the room, Ying Lingshue's cheeks flushed under the candlelight. Then she quickly returned to normal. However, a determined look flashed in her eyes as if she had made some kind of decision. "Sir, Lingxue greets you." Ying Lingxue bowed gracefully, showing a graceful and noble temperament. The unique charm of a young woman also made Yi Xian look slightly. Ying Lingxue was delighted. It seemed that she was not old and still had the charm of a young girl. "Madam, you are welcome. Please sit cross-legged." "Bring me the ice fox," Yi Xian said faintly and ordered them one by one. Soon, the ice fox was brought over by the young man. Ying Lingxue sat cross-legged, waiting for Yi Xian to cast a spell to treat her. "Second brother, Yun, sir is going to cast a spell to treat me. You can go out temporarily. Don't disturb sir." Before Yi Xian could cast a spell, Ying Lingxue spoke softly. This also made Yi Xian's mouth curve into a strange smile, but he did not say anything. "Sister-in-law you?" Xiao Changhe's face was flushed. He noticed that something was wrong when he entered the room. His sister-in-law's makeup was exquisite and she had changed into a white palace gauze. This was obviously a sign that she was going to give herself to him. "Get out." Ying Lingxue looked weak, but she was also a person of her word. Xiao Changhe clenched his fists, but in the end, he could only sigh helplessly and turn to leave. The young man did not notice anything and quickly walked out of the room, afraid that it would affect Yi Xian's casting of a spell to treat Ying Lingxue. The cold blood disease is just yin qi entering the body. This ice fox is an object of extreme yin. It can draw out the cold qi in your body. After pushing through the blood, this disease can be cured. As the uncle and nephew left, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back and spoke faintly. However, a strange look flashed through his eyes when he looked at the woman. "Sir, you've given me and my son the grace of being reborn. Lingxue is only a weak woman. I don't have anything to repay sir. Only this thin willow figure can serve sir. I hope sir won't dislike me." It had to be said that Ying Lingxue was very bold. She slowly got up from the bed and began to undress herself. Although her face was very shy, there was a firm look in her eyes. Temptation. It was a blatant temptation. Temptation from a mature and charming young woman. "If you don't want your family to die, I advise you to stop." Before Ying Lingxue could continue, Yi Xian's voice gradually became cold. The temperature of the entire boudoir suddenly dropped to the freezing point. In an instant, the woman's movements froze, and her blushing cheeks gradually turned pale. Chapter 1384. "Sir you?" Ying Lingxue asked in a daze. It was not that she was arrogant. As the young mistress of the Shao clan, countless people coveted her body. She also knew that her appearance was one of the top 3 in the entire Ice River City. She believed that Yi Xian would definitely want her, and she and her son would have a backer. But at this moment, she suddenly realized that she seemed to be very stupid, because the black-robed man in front of her looked at her without any human emotions in his eyes. His gray eyes revealed a touch of ruthlessness. "You are still too naive, woman," Yi Xian said faintly and casually found a chair to sit down. "Sir, could it be that I am not good enough for you?" Ying Lingshue's face was pale. Her heart was pierced fiercely, and she felt ashamed and angry. "In fact, when I came here, it was reasonable to say that you would only end up dead. But after thinking about it, I still saved you and didn't take your life. After all, if I used my means to kill you, it wouldn't be of much help to my next plan. Yi Xian's 5 fingers kept tapping on the table, making rhythmic sounds. But when he finished speaking, Ying Lingshue's face was already as white as paper. Her eyes showed a touch of horror when she looked at Yi Xian. Because at this moment, Yi Xian was cold and sinister. The way he looked at her didn't contain the slightest bit of human emotion. It was as if he was looking at a weak prey that could devour her at any time. Who are you? At this moment, Ying Lingxue was extremely nervous because she found that Yi Xian was definitely not a righteous great cultivator. Instead, he was filled with a kind of fear that made her heart palpitate. She was afraid that he was an extremely terrifying great demon. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you won't live. Before you die, I want to make a deal with you. I think this deal is a great blessing for you. Yi Xian slowly got up and strolled to Ying Lingxue. He looked down at her in a condescending manner, which made the woman tremble and feel extremely terrified. You want to kill me? Fear appeared in Ying Lingshue's eyes. She had just escaped from danger and thought that she had found someone to rely on. She did not expect that the person she thought she could rely on was the one who wanted to kill her. No, it's not me who wants to kill you, but you want to die in the hands of the Xiao family. Moreover, I want Xiao Yun to personally witness you being killed by them. Yi Xian said lightly, as if he was talking about something very casual. But when the woman heard his words, her face turned pale. She didn't know why Yi Xian would do such a thing. Perhaps Yi Xian had sensed the woman's thoughts. The corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile as he said, "There is a demon's heart hidden in your son's body. This demon's heart has yet to be activated. If I had not appeared, perhaps he would have lived an ordinary life. Perhaps you and your son would have died in the hands of the Xiao clan. But now, my appearance has changed everything. I will nurture him into a demon's son who can compete with the strongest seeds. In the future, he might even become an existence like the strongest throughout history. Shouldn't you thank me?" Yi Xian's voice was like a devil's as he described the future that Ying Lingshue's youth should have. You? Ying Lingxue was not stupid. On the contrary, she was a very smart woman. She had already vaguely guessed Yi Xian's purpose. So, the deal between you and me is very simple. Your death will draw out the demon's heart in his body. From then on, I will nurture him into an expert. I believe that you will be able to rest in peace in the underworld, right? Yi Xian said lightly. Silence, dead silence, speechlessness. The atmosphere in the room was extremely oppressive. Ying Lingxue did not speak for a long time. Her expression was constantly changing because she could completely see that Yi Xian was not a kind person at all. What if I don't agree? After several breaths of time, Ying Lingxue raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. You know the answer. Yi Xian smiled, but his smile was very evil and filled with extremely terrifying killing intent. You will kill all of us? Ying Lingxue whispered bitterly. Although she had long guessed this outcome, she still had a trace of hope in her heart. I like smart people. You really didn't let me down, Yi Xian praised. Okay, I promise you that I will play this game with you. But after I die, you have to promise me that you will never hurt Yun. Although Ying Lingxue was ambitious, she was still the youth's mother after all. For the sake of the youth's good life, she could only sacrifice herself. Thank you. Yi Xian smiled and said with a look of satisfaction in his eyes. In the courtyard, the cold winter wind was blowing and the north wind was biting cold. The uncle and niece were anxiously waiting, wondering if Yi Xian could cure Ying Lingshue's cold blood. The uncle and niece were also constantly pacing in the side courtyard. The door of the room slowly opened, which also attracted the uncle and niece's attention. They saw Yi Xian and Ying Lingxue strolling out. Ying Lingshue's originally pale little face had recovered its rosy color. She didn't look weak at all. Mother, your cold blood is cured? The youth quickly walked over, his face full of excitement. Thank you, sir, for your help. Mother's cold blood is cured. Ying Lingxue said with a smile, but if one looked carefully, they would find that there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. Obviously, she knew that she didn't have long to live. "Thank you for your kindness, senior." "Thank you, sir." The uncle and niece hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian. "Sir, I would like to talk to Yun. Please wait a moment." Ying Lingxue already knew that her life was coming to an end. Naturally, she couldn't bear to part with the youth. Yi Xian naturally agreed because this would be the last time they would be together. Not to mention that Yi Xian was ruthless and cruel, insisting on forcing Ying Lingxue to her death and separating mother and son forever. If Yi Xian hadn't appeared, Ying Lingxue would have died without a doubt. She would have died under the heaven-returning elixir. Every man for himself. There were so many tragic things in this world. If Yi Xian had a kind heart, he would have died many times over. Moreover, if Yi Xian hadn't appeared, the youth would have died in vain in the ice sea. Yi Xian's appearance saved the youth's life, so Yi Xian didn't feel any guilt in his heart. "Mother, what's wrong? Could it be that your cold blood hasn't been cured?" After being pulled aside by Ying Lingxue, the youth felt that there was something wrong with his mother, which made him panic. "Yun, you have to cultivate well in the future. You have to remember that you can't trust anyone in this world. Only when you're strong enough can you truly survive in this world," Ying Lingxue said in a deep voice. "What about Mr. Uncle?" The youth was confused. "You have to be careful of Mr. Yi. You can cultivate with him, but never trust him," Ying Lingxue secretly warned him through voice transmission. Chapter 1385. Unfortunately, Yi Xian overheard their conversation. However, Yi Xian only smiled faintly at Ying Lingxue's words. He wasn't angry at all. Yi Xian didn't need the youth to trust him. He only saw the youth as a sharp blade in his hand that he would wield at critical moments. That was enough. As the conversation between the mother and son continued, Yi Xian stood in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. No matter how much snow fell from the sky, he didn't move an inch. No one knew Yi Xian's true intentions, nor did they know why Yi Xian was wasting so much time on the youth. However, Yi Xian never did useless things. He delayed his own cultivation to come here because the youth was an extremely important chess piece in his hands. More importantly, this was related to an important matter. Ultimate. That's right, ultimate throughout the ages. Perhaps some people would be confused. What was the relationship between the youth and ultimate throughout the ages? Could it be that Yi Xian wants to nurture him into the strongest of all time in the next Yuanhui? After all, Yi Xian was only a Dao-seeking realm cultivator. Even he hadn't become an ultimate, so how could he possibly nurture this youth into an ultimate in the ages? In truth, Yi Xian's goal was simple. The instigator of all of this was the Lord of the Extreme Fiend. Don't forget that millions of years ago, Yi Xian had ascended to the pinnacle and used many forbidden techniques to kill the Extreme Fiend, causing him to fall in the primal chaos. However, Yi Xian hadn't forgotten that the Lord of the Extreme Fiend was the ruler of the 9th period. Every ultimate in the ages would fuse with the heavenly heart of chaos of a period. When the Extreme Fiend died, the heavenly heart of chaos's aura disappeared without a trace. Even the undying Heaven Lord and the others couldn't stop it. Yi Xian had a feeling that although the Lord of the Extreme Fiend was dead, the heavenly heart of chaos still contained the last bit of his will before he died. It would definitely search for his successor. In the Chaos Verse, there were 12 periods of time. In total, there were 12 of them, and not a single one could be missing. That was one of the fundamental principles of the Chaos Verse. Hence, Yi Xian's plan was very simple. He wanted to nurture this youth into a demonic son and lure out the heart of chaos left behind by the supreme demon. Then, he would have the youth assimilate this heart of chaos and replace the supreme demon lord, the supreme expert of the 9th epoch. And this was Yi Xian's true motive. Yi Xian wasn't the only one plotting this. The other strongest of all time were probably searching everywhere for the heavenly heart of chaos left behind by the Lord of Extreme Demons. Finding the heavenly heart of chaos would depend on their own abilities. Yi Xian was very confident. He was also certain of one thing. As long as he could draw out the youth's demonic heart, coupled with the technique he had imparted to the youth, he would definitely be able to achieve his goal. Before Yi Xian had drawn out the shadow of eternity from the river of time, the 8 sovereigns had each planted their own supreme powers in his body. Although Yi Xian had refined the 8 supreme powers and greatly increased his cultivation, the mysteries within were still engraved in his heart. As long as he imparted the Supreme Demon Lord's mysteries to the youth and had him join the Supreme Demon Sky Palace, he would definitely be able to slowly draw out the heavenly heart of chaos left behind by the Supreme Demon after his death. Ha! Suddenly, hearty laughter rang out. A middle-aged man strolled into the side courtyard. This person's black hair was shining brightly, and his battle robe seemed to fit him very well. His face was gentle and refined, but it did not lose the sense of majesty. 2 white-haired elders followed him into the side courtyard. The 2 of them were half a step behind the middle-aged man, and their attitude towards him was very respectful. Ma, patriarch? Looking at the middle-aged man who walked into the side courtyard, Xiao Changhe exclaimed loudly. The mother and son looked at the person with a slight change in expression. They did not expect the patriarch of the Xiao clan to come here personally. Xiao Changhe's exclamation did not make the middle-aged man feel anything. He looked straight at Yi Xian, then smiled and said, "I am Xiao Haichuan, the patriarch of the Xiao clan. May I know your name?" Xiao Haichuan's attitude was extremely humble, which also made the mother and son and Xiao Changhe stunned. In their impression, Xiao Haichuan was swift and decisive. Although he looked gentle on the outside, he was actually cold-blooded and ruthless. However, such a dignified and unfathomable patriarch of the Xiao clan actually cupped his hands and bowed to Yi Xian. This made the mother and son and Xiao Changhe feel extremely shocked. Yi Xian saw through this person's cultivation at a glance, and a playful look flashed in his eyes. This person was actually a great saint. In this small ice river city, he could indeed be called an overlord. Yi Tian, from the Central Territory. Central Territory? Xiao Haichuan's expression suddenly changed, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. What kind of place was the Central Territory? It was the center of the 5 regions of chaos. All the supreme orthodoxies and great sects gathered in the Central Territory. The 5 regions spanned hundreds of millions of miles, and there was no end to it. The Central Territory was said to be boundless, and it was also the center of the 5 regions. It was impossible to cross it without the cultivation of the Yin-Yang realm. Xiao Haichuan's mind raced, and his attitude became even more humble. There was a warm smile on his face, but there was already a huge wave of shock in his heart. "I didn't expect you to come from the Central Territory. Since you have graced us with your presence in the Ice River City's Xiao clan, I have already prepared a banquet and invite you to come. We can sit down and discuss how to welcome you." Xiao Haichuan did not mention anything about the mother and son. He did not even say a word about the 3 elders killed by Yi Xian. He invited Yi Xian very humbly, and his words were extremely sincere. "Sir, you can't go." The young man trembled slightly and stopped him. No one knew how terrifying the Xiao clan was better than him. Although he did not know the cultivation of the Xiao clan master, there were many supreme elders and patriarchs above him. If he went to the banquet, Yi Xian would be in danger. "Yun, since Yi Tian has graced our Xiao clan with his presence, how can we not treat our guests well?" Xiao Haichuan smiled, but his voice was slightly gloomy and full of threat. "It's all right. Since the Xiao clan master has invited me, I still have to give him face." Yi Xian said with a smile, but there was a cruel and playful look in his eyes. Because a killing scene was about to happen, and the young man's transformation would begin here. Yi Xian's smile caused Xiao Haichuan to be shocked. Could it be that this person was really a cultivator from the Great Central Region? Furthermore, he had an unimaginable cultivation, so he wasn't afraid of the Xiao clan in the slightest? Suppressing the shock in his heart, Xiao Haichuan said gently, "Fellow, please." Yi Xian walked out slowly, and Ying Lingshue's face turned pale because she was about to face death. This was also her promise to Yi Xian. Cold Cloud Pavilion. Under the invitation of the Xiao clan master, Yi Xian walked in slowly, followed by the mother and son and Xiao Changhe. Seeing that Yi Xian had already entered the trap, Xiao Haichuan's expression changed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He murmured, "Boy, if you know what's good for you, you still have a chance to live. Otherwise, you will be reduced to ashes today." Chapter 1386. The entire cold cloud pavilion was extremely luxurious, showing the style of a family. Yi Xian's gaze landed on a person sitting cross-legged on a praying mat in front of him. Judging from his cultivation, he was only at the Saint King realm. The Saint King realm was considered an overlord in the entire chaotic world, and was even more supreme in this small ice river city. However, to Yi Xian, the so-called Saint King realm was no different from an ant. If he wanted to kill him, he could do so with a flick of his finger. What made Yi Xian laugh the most was that even though the little Saint King in front of him had his cultivation damaged, he still had a dignified look on his face, as if he was a peerless figure. "Little ant, pretentious." These simple words showed Yi Xian's sarcasm, but today he was not the main character. The real main character was the young man behind him. As if strolling in the courtyard, Yi Xian walked forward slowly, while the young man and his mother followed behind nervously. The more fearless Yi Xian was, the more the Shao clan head felt uneasy. The light in his eyes kept changing, and he quickly followed Yi Xian. As for the mother and son, they were no longer in his heart. As the Shao clan head, the only thing he cared about was Yi Xian, and he was constantly guessing what level Yi Xian's cultivation was at. The smoke was faint, the sound of the zither was melodious, and 4 beautiful maids were dancing. This person had black hair and a white beard, and he looked very dignified, making people feel awe at a glance. He was watching the maids dance indifferently. "You killed several of my clansmen, and you still dare to come here. Are you not afraid of death?" The Shao clan's ancestor coldly spoke. His eyes looked towards Yi Xian as the might of a saint king that blotted out the sky and covered the earth burst forth. The Shao clan ancestor's aura was terrifying. Although it was only directed at Yi Xian, the rest of the aura made the few people tremble, and they already felt a sense of submission. Yi Xian took a step forward, his Saint King aura instantly disappearing as a hint of disdain appeared on Yi Xian's face. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to draw out the young man's demonic heart, he would have smashed this kind of trash into meat paste with a single slap. How could he allow this kind of ant to put on airs in front of him? It was as if thunderclouds were rumbling, as if war drums were beating. Yi Xian slowly walked forward, and with every step he took, the entire hall shook uncontrollably. The surrounding walls continuously cracked, and the murderous aura of death howled out. Such an unforeseen event completely stunned everyone. The young man and his mother were even more excited. However, the Shao clan head's body and mind were trembling because no one knew better than him how terrifying the ancestor was. The ancestor had already stepped into the Saint King realm. Although he was only a lesser Saint King, he was still a Saint King. He originally thought that Yi Xian would immediately be suppressed by the ancestor's aura when he entered this place, and would even kneel down and submit to the Shao clan. He didn't expect that this person would actually shatter the ancestor's aura and instead release a soaring killing intent that suppressed the ancestor. This scene made the Shao clan head suck in a breath of cold air. He suddenly had an extremely bad feeling in his heart, and a hint of worry flashed across his eyes. All of a sudden, the Shao clan ancestor laughed loudly, and his originally incomparably dignified face turned gentle. He slowly got up and personally walked down the stairs. He cupped his hands towards Yi Xian and said, "This old man is Shao Baina. I originally wanted to make a small joke with fellow Taoist, but please don't take it seriously." The Shao clan ancestor's expression changed at the drop of a hat, completely losing the might of a Saint King. At this moment his attitude was extremely humble, which also made the mother and son stunned. Yi Xian's lips curled into a playful smile. "Oh? Don't tell me you won't avenge the deaths of your clan members in my hands?" Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. If my descendants are disrespectful to you, they are disrespectful to me. If such an ignorant ant dies, so be it. Why would my Shao clan seek revenge on you? The Shao clan ancestor's tone was sincere, without the slightest hint of reluctance, as if the one who flew into a rage just now was another person. Hand over the antidote for the heaven-returning elixir. If you can't hand over the antidote, there's no need for your Shao clan to exist. Yi Xian did not want to waste his breath on such an ant at all, and directly began his plan. What? Suddenly, just as Yi Xian finished speaking, Ying Lingshue's face instantly turned pale, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her weak body instantly went limp. Mother? What's wrong? In the next moment, the young man's expression changed drastically. He originally thought that Ying Lingxue had already been saved by Yi Xian, but he did not expect such an unforeseen event to occur. Although I can treat her frost blood disease, she consumed the so-called heaven-returning elixir previously. This poison is too overbearing, and even I am unable to save her. Only by giving her the antidote can she save her life. Yi Xian pretended to sigh, showing a helpless expression. Of course, all of this was Yi Xian's arrangement. A small amount of heaven-returning elixir was not difficult for him at all. However, Ying Lingxue had to die in the hands of the Shao clan in order to stimulate the demon heart in the young man's body. Shao Baina, hand over the antidote. The young man's eyes instantly turned blood red as he looked at the Shao clan's patriarch furiously. He had already forgotten his respect for the Shao clan, and the veins on his forehead were even wriggling like maggots. Antidote. The Shao clan's patriarch's face was slightly pale as he looked at Yi Xian with extreme fear. There was no antidote for this heaven-returning elixir at all. Anyone who consumed it would definitely die, so where could he go to give the young man the antidote? This? The Shao clan's patriarch was anxious. He was not afraid of the young man, but he was extremely wary of Yi Xian, because the aura that Yi Xian revealed just now had clearly surpassed the Saint King realm. If the other party attacked him, the Shao clan would definitely face a great calamity today. Pooh! Suddenly, a mouthful of black blood spurted out from Ying Lingshue's mouth. Her originally dignified face was already filled with black qi, and the vitality around her began to slowly dissipate. Mother! The young man roared in grief, completely panicking. He kept shaking his mother's body, which was beginning to turn cold, as tears kept rolling down from his eyes. Sir, please save my mother, I beg you. In the next moment, the young man suddenly knelt at Yi Xian's feet, sorrowfully begging Yi Xian for help. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed helplessly. It's not that I don't want to save her, but there's nothing I can do. Men, quickly ask the clan's divine doctor to come here. The Shao clan's patriarch was panicking. Although he could not feel Yi Xian's killing intent, his heart was trembling, as if something extremely bad was about to happen. Soon, as the young man cried in grief, a white-haired old man quickly walked into Cold Heaven Pavilion and quickly took Ying Lingshue's pulse. This old man is really powerless. After several dozen breaths, this so-called divine doctor said in shame, because this heaven-returning elixir was too vicious. With his medical skills, he could not save Ying Lingxue at all. In fact, even if this divine doctor could save Ying Lingxue, Yi Xian would not let Ying Lingxue live. After all, this woman's death was the turning point in the young man's life. You trash, you can't cure my mother. Go to hell. Chapter 1387. The young man's eyes were bloodshot, and he roared like a ferocious beast. He pulled out the long saber hanging at his waist and chopped off the doctor's head. You? The expression of the Shao clan's ancestor changed. A trace of anger flashed through his eyes, but he still endured it because Yi Xian's existence made him too fearful. Actually, I have another way, but Yi Xian pretended to sigh and did not continue. However, the young man seemed to have grasped at a life-saving straw. He kowtowed to Yi Xian frantically and cried out, Sir, you're someone as powerful as the Tong'an. Please save my mother. I'm willing to do anything. I have a secret technique called the blood exchange technique. However, this technique is too cruel and vicious. It kills a life and takes its blood, soul, and essence, and then fuses it into your mother's body. Perhaps it can save her life, Yi Xian said. No. Suddenly, Ying Lingxue struggled to open her eyes as she was dying. She held the young man's hand tightly and shook her head weakly. Perhaps at the last moment of her life, Lingxue finally understood one thing. Although she had promised Yi Xian to sacrifice herself, she also realized that Yi Xian was a devil. If her son followed him in the future, he would not have a good ending. "Mother, I won't let you die," the young man said sorrowfully and looked at Yi Xian with hope. "It's easy to save your mother, but you have to kill everyone in the Shao clan and use their blood to replenish the vitality in your mother's body. Are you willing?" Yi Xian's expression was calm, but his words were like the devil's, full of bewitchment. When the young man heard it, his eyes became even fiercer. I'm willing. The young man already showed signs of demonization. The blood in his eyes became more and more intense, and he began to act under Yi Xian's guidance. "Xianmo, I bestow upon you the extreme devil-slaughtering power. Go, exterminate the entire Shao clan. Only then will you be able to save your mother's life." Rumble. At this moment, an extreme demonic aura rose around Yi Xian's body. The dense demonic light was boundless and dark, as if even the sun star couldn't dispel this wisp of darkness. Boom. Yi Xian was smiling, but his smile was too devilish and cruel. He formed a series of seals with both hands and unleashed terrifying demonic runes, all of which surged towards the youth. This strand of extreme demonic force was far too terrifying. When it entered the young man's body, it caused his skin to explode. Large amounts of blood flowed out as the young man roared out in extreme pain. However, in the next moment, an extremely terrifying demonic light rose around the young man. After all, this was the extreme demonic force, known as one of the 12 ultimate powers. The pain it caused the young man was simply unimaginable. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and quietly watched the young man endure the extreme demonic force. This method of his was too risky. After all, the extreme demonic force was the ultimate power, and the young man's body was too weak. If he couldn't withstand this power, he would explode and die. However, Yi Xian believed that he didn't choose the wrong person. If the young man really couldn't withstand the extreme demonic force, it would prove that he was a good-for-nothing, and there was no need to waste time on him. "No, don't let him go." Suddenly, Lingxue cried out in grief. Tears kept falling from her eyes. She really began to regret it because the young man was too miserable at this moment. This was a sign that he was about to demonize. "Senior, what's your purpose?" Xiao Changhe couldn't hold it in any longer. He questioned Yi Xian with a serious face, and the steel saber in his hand had already been unsheathed. Extreme demonic chaos, the fall of all things. If you want to save your mother, kill him. Yi Xian's words were like a demonic voice that buried the soul, entering the young man's ears without missing a word. At this moment, the young man's demonic light was surging, and his scarlet eyes were blooming with a terrifying demonic light. "Kill, kill, kill." The young man roared in his sleep and suddenly turned to look at Xiao Changhe. The steel saber in his hand was completely covered by the demonic light, and the terrifying fluctuations caused the void to explode inch by inch. "Yun, you wake up. I'm your uncle." Xiao Changhe's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted at the young man, hoping to wake him up from his demonization. "Uncle? Uncle?" The young man's demonic light was surging, but his demonic chi began to stagnate. Obviously, he still had his own consciousness and had not completely entered the state of demonization. Such a scene made Yi Xian frown slightly. He was still too anxious. At this moment, although the young man's demonic heart had been aroused, it had not been completely released. "If you don't kill him, your mother will die without a doubt." Yi Xian continued to bewitch the young man. The sky-bearing skill began to evolve the extreme demonic power, and he once again injected it into the young man. "Kill!" In the next moment, the young man instantly went crazy. Under Xiao Changhe's dull gaze, the young man slashed at him with his saber, directly cutting his uncle in half. A large amount of blood sprayed on the young man's face, and he was instantly stunned. Lingxue cried out in grief. She had never thought that her son would kill Xiao Changhe. This was simply too cruel for her to accept. "What did I do?" Perhaps Lingxue's voice had awakened the young man's mind. He stared blankly at the two halves of Xiao Changhe's corpse, and his body and mind began to tremble. The signs of demonization were gradually receding. First step to kill, second step to become an extreme demon. Kill all the people of the Shao clan and plunder their blood, soul, and essence. Yi Xian was chanting in a low voice in the language of the extreme demon, and also to arouse the demonic heart in the young man's heart. Kill! The young man's body trembled, and the extreme demon light gushed out again. He suddenly waved his hand at the Shao clan's old ancestor and the others, and a terrifying demonic force burst out. Let's go! The Shao clan's old ancestor had already sensed that something was wrong. Not only was the young man's aura terrifying him, but what terrified him the most was Yi Xian. The young man slashed out with his saber, and the extreme demon force burst out, turning the entire Cold Cloud Pavilion into ashes. The extreme demon saber light was so terrifying that even the Shao clan's old ancestor, who was at the Saint King realm, could not resist it. The Shao clan's old ancestor was directly killed on the spot, and his two halves were dripping with blood. He could not even resist a single blow. After all, the extreme demon force was the strongest force. Although the young man could not exert its full power, it was still not something the Shao clan's old ancestor could resist. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Yi Xian said ruthlessly. His voice was like the sound of Sanskrit, instantly driving the young man into a state of madness. He turned into a black light and began to slaughter the people of the Shao clan. Ah! Help! Don't kill me! Cries and pleas for mercy could be heard endlessly. A large amount of blood dyed the Shao clan red, and broken limbs could be seen everywhere. The young man shuttled through the Shao clan, gradually turning the area into a slaughterhouse. Demon, you will die a horrible death. Ying Lingxue cried out in grief. She witnessed Yi Xian turn her son into a terrifying killing machine with her own eyes. She looked at Yi Xian with eyes full of resentment and curses. Yi Xian walked up to Ying Lingxue, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. He patted the girl's shoulder affectionately and said, "You can go in peace. He will grow into a figure at the peak of the chaos in the future. Actually, there's nothing wrong with being a demon. What do you think? You will die a horrible death." Ying Lingxue cursed bitterly, but her body had already begun to turn black and purple. Obviously, the overbearing toxicity of the heaven-returning elixir had already invaded her entire body. Chapter 1388. Many people have cursed me to die a horrible death. You're not the first and definitely not the last. In fact, you should thank me. If it weren't for me, not only would you have died today, but your son would have died too. At least he would have survived. Shouldn't you thank me? Yi Xian whispered faintly. He was telling his reason. Although his reason was extremely evil, it was indeed as he said if one thought about it carefully. Without Yi Xian's appearance, the mother and son were doomed to die. However, although what Yi Xian did seemed cruel, it did allow the young man to survive. Kill! The roar of a ferocious beast resounded through the air. The young man had already slaughtered his way to the point of madness. His entire aura started to turn cold and ruthless. After he slaughtered everyone in the Shao clan, the light of the extreme devil completely enveloped him. Mother! Mother! A beast-like roar came from the young man's mouth. He walked toward Ying Lingxue with a blood-stained saber in his hand. Even if he was covered by the power of the extreme devil, there was still a touch of spiritual light in his blood-red eyes. Such a scene made Yi Xian frown. He didn't expect the young man to be able to maintain a trace of sanity and not be demonized at all. Although the heart of the devil began to appear in his body, it was still suppressed by his rationality. It's hard to be demonized when there's something in the heart. Yi Xian whispered. He had already seen the young man's state at the moment. Obviously, Ying Lingxue was the young man's sustenance, which allowed him to maintain his sanity. They're all dead. Save my mother. The young man staggered over. The blood-soul essence in his hand was extremely strong. Obviously, he hoped that Yi Xian could perform the blood exchange technique to save Ying Lingxue's life. It's too late. The poison has entered her internal organs and even her soul has begun to dim. I can't save her now. Yi Xian pretended to sigh. Impossible. Hearing such bad news, the young man's demonic light soared. His remaining spiritual consciousness began to collapse. Obviously, he was completely stimulated by the bad news. In order to further provoke the young man, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with cruelty. It seemed that he had no choice but to let Ying Lingxue die tragically in front of the young man. Otherwise, if this trend continued, he would die from Qigong deviation before the young man was truly possessed. Ah! At the next moment, Ying Lingxue cried out weakly in pain. Her body began to melt, and large amounts of flesh and blood began to melt into blood. It was obvious that she was about to die. Ah! Such a scene caused the young man's eyes to go bloodshot, and his mind suffered an unimaginable shock. However, he was unable to save Ying Lingshue's life at all, and this caused him to go mad with pain. Yun-e. At the last moment of her life, Ying Lingxue was in so much pain that she couldn't speak. She could only curse Yi Xian to the end of her life. Mother. The Tong Tian moved, and the demonic light rushed into the sky. The young man's chest was violently beating. The demonic heart that had been hidden in his body for a long time was finally unsealed at this moment. The extremely terrifying demonic qi was released, and the sky of the entire Ice River City became as dark as ink. Massacre the city and kill everyone. From now on, you will have no relatives or friends in this world. Everything is nothing but pigs and dogs in your eyes. Go and kill your way out of the Tongtian Great Path. Truly turn into a ruthless demon and fight for the position of the strongest supreme demon. Yi Xian smiled, and his voice sounded like a curse in the young man's ears. This also caused the young man to roar to the heavens. His whole body turned into a black light and rushed into the sky. The supreme demon world killed everything. At this moment, the young man was completely demonized. His demonic heart illuminated the past and present. The long blade in his hand raised a waterfall of heaven and earth. He was like an ancient ferocious beast killing everything in the Ice River City. All living creatures in the city would become bones under his feet. Don't kill me! What is this thing? In the next moment, the entire Ice River City was filled with cries. All sorts of cries for mercy could be heard. However, as the massacre continued, these cries grew softer and softer. A thick stench of blood soared into the sky. The supreme demon world was ruthless. Only the demonic nature of killing was eternal. At this moment, the young man was massacring the city and venting the depression in his body. Just as Yi Xian said, he would have no relatives or friends from now on. He would be alone. Although the world was big, there was no one to accompany him. When this loneliness swept over him, he was no longer the young Yi Xian, but had truly become another person. And this person's name was Yi Xianmo. In the Shao clan residence, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. At his feet was Ying Lingshue's skeleton. A strong wind blew, causing Yi Xian's hair to dance in the wind. His black robes fluttered. The smell of blood filled the void, but Yi Xian's expression was calm and unruffled. His entire being was extremely calm. Your death has helped him. This is also a good deed for you. In the future, he will also become the new Supreme Demon Lord. This is my compensation to you. Yi Xian looked down at Ying Lingshue's skeleton indifferently and let out a long sigh. The strong were always strong, and the weak were like dogs. Yi Xian had always believed in this principle. Ying Lingxue was weak, so she was played in the palm of his hand. This was the tragedy of the weak. If Ying Lingxue was stronger than Yi Xian, this would not have happened. In the world, there was only the strong and the weak. There was never right or wrong. If you were weak, you deserved to die. If you were weak, you were a dog. Only the strong could dominate everything. This was also the cruel law of the chaotic universe. What was fairness? What was kindness? Fairness was the rule that the strong set for the weak. Kindness was also something that the strong flaunted. In the face of true benefits, these hypocritical things would all be torn to pieces by the strong, and the weak could only be sacrificed for benefits. From ancient times until now, this principle had not changed in the slightest. Kill. Yi Xian Mo had already become a demon. His demon heart provided him with extremely terrifying power. Coupled with the ultimacy of the supreme demon that Yi Xian had injected into his body, he was the great demon of this world. It had to be said that although the mystical demon body was known to be top-notch, the most important thing was the demon heart in his body. Yi Xian also valued this demon heart of his. Once this demon heart was released, coupled with the ultimacy of the supreme demon, Yi Xian Mo stepped into the Saint King realm in an instant. Except for the fact that he had not established his own Saint King world, Yi Xian Mo could be said to have reached the heavens in a single bound. The stronger the demonic nature of the supreme demon, the more terrifying their cultivation would be. This was also the ultimacy of the supreme demon. As Yi Xian Mo's demonic nature became stronger, his cultivation would also increase day by day. When he merged with the heavenly heart of chaos left behind by the supreme demon lord, he would be able to inherit the position of the supreme demon lord. Of course, this still required Yi Xian to slowly plan for Yi Xian Mo. After all, this kind of thing could not be done overnight. Perhaps some people would ask why Yi Xian did not obtain the heavenly heart of chaos left behind by the supreme demon lord himself. Why did he not become the supreme demon lord himself? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.